Good morning. We are going to get started this morning with an invocation led by Pastor John Brennan of First Lutheran Church of Oklahoma City, and that will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Stella Parr, representing Girl Scouts Troop 3469. As you are able, please stand.
Heavenly Father, we come before you this morning with thanksgiving for all that you have so graciously blessed us with. We are truly thankful to live in freedom and in this great state and this vibrant city. We ask that you pour out your Holy Spirit on these who serve us and lead us here today. Grant them wisdom and insight and the courage to do what is good and godly and right, even if it's not popular. Bless these men and women for their willingness to serve. Please prosper their good works. We ask this in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Will you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic from which it stands, one nation, under God, invincible, for liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor, and thank you, Stella. All right, I call this meeting of the City Council to order, and we have Office of the Mayor, where we do have some presentations, and I will make my way to the front to do that. Why don't we start with our friends from the Mayor's Committee on Disability Concerns, and so if everybody would make their way to the front as I do the same. All right. As many know, the Mayor's Committee on Disability Concerns has been doing amazing work in our city now for many decades, and we have some of the members of the committee here today, and we have several things we want to do this morning, but we're going to start by reading the proclamation proclaiming Disability Awareness Month, and I would ask the clerk to read that proclamation.
Whereas the month of October is designated in the United States as National Disability Awareness Month, and whereas the City of Oklahoma City has prioritized issues of concern to members of the disability community for many decades, led most notably by the work of the Mayor's Committee on Disability Concerns. And whereas the City of Oklahoma City continues to lead among Oklahoma cities thanks to the dedicated employment of a full-time Americans with Disabilities Act ADA coordinator, and whereas Oklahoma City's ADA coordinator Keith Wilkinson works daily to implement the city's ADA transition plan and to ensure that the city's programs and facilities are accessible to everyone. And whereas work at City Hall continues on numerous fronts, including to provide more ADA accessible sidewalks. And whereas our community acknowledges the employment talent pool that exists among people with disabilities and believes that the skills, talent, and productivity of our citizens with disabilities should be drawn upon to help build our city and energize our economy, and that Oklahoma City residents with disabilities deserve the opportunity to work and have full lives, and that our city needs the knowledge, skill, and talent of all our citizens in order to build a greater community for all of us. And whereas on this day, the Mayor's Committee on Disability Concerns honors Not Your Average Joe, Laura Martin, and Rachel McLemore, who either have disabilities or are individuals or entities that work for the betterment of the disability community. And whereas on this day, We honor Herb Bailey and Dr. Henry Assen for their years of dedication to the citizens of Oklahoma City and to the committee, and resolve to follow their lead and raise awareness of issues of concern to our residents with disabilities. Now therefore, I, David Holt, Mayor of the City of Oklahoma City, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2022 to be Disability Awareness Month in Oklahoma City, and urge observance by all citizens as a reminder that people with disabilities can learn, work, pay taxes, buy goods and services, be self-supporting, and lead others if given equal opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah, let's hear it for them. Well, that sets the tone, but we also this morning want to do something that pre-COVID we would do at a really spectacular lunch, and maybe that'll come back someday, but we've been kind of figuring out our way into this post-COVID chapter. And today, for the first time since I've been mayor, we're going to bestow these annual awards here in the council meeting. And so we have some awards that have been decided upon by the Mayor's Committee on Disability Concerns, and they're sitting right over there. Do I need to grab them? Are you going to get them? Of course, we have Sidna Madden here, the longtime chair of the Mayor's Committee. Yeah, let's hear it for Sidna, yes. All right. So our first award is the Public Personnel Award. This year's recipient believes information about and for people with disabilities needs to be promoted loudly, but in a dignified way. She writes and shares information so society can see people with disabilities that they are like everyone else, whether it be on Facebook, Twitter, or on the committee's website. She shines a positive spotlight on all things disability. This year's Oklahoma City Mayor's Committee on Disability Concerns Public Personnel Award goes to Rachel McLemore, Communications Officer for the Oklahoma Department of Rehabilitation Services. There's Rachel. Congratulations. Congratulations, Rachel. Next is the Inclusivity Award. This year's recipient spearheaded an exhibit at the Oklahoma Historical Society called From Institutionalization to Inclusion, the History of Disabilities in Oklahoma. This exhibit provided the foundation to remembering our past so we can successfully serve and remove barriers for individuals with disabilities in the future. Guests were able to view images of the institutions, legislators and citizens who fought to break down barriers, the organizations making a difference today, and self-advocates who continue to lead the charge for change. This year's Oklahoma City Mayor's Committee on Disability Concerns Inclusivity Award goes to Laura Martin, Deputy Director of the Oklahoma Historical Society. Finally, we have the Employer of the Year Award. Today's employer not only satisfies our need for a great cup of coffee, which they do, I've had some, they also embody an attitude I would like to see all of Oklahoma City employers adopt: meaningful employment for all. Yes. Yeah. They empower their employees, who include adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, to learn new skills that can be used either in or out of the coffee shop. They pay at least minimum wage, and the employees with disabilities work alongside their coworkers. The Oklahoma City Mayor's Committee on Disability Concerns Employer of the Year goes to Not Your Average Joe. Tim Herbal, founder, is here today.
Come here, Miss L.
That's awesome. Exceptional, Acceptional, including people of all abilities. You said this is a word you invented.
It's a word we invented. And
I love it.
You have it for water, but more importantly, the coffee lids in here.
Yes, awesome. Well, I was going to say no coffee in it, just FYI. Not a big deal, but thank you so much.
Let's squeeze in. Come on, jump in there. Jump in there. There we go. Here we go. Danielle. One more. Thank you. There you go.
Yeah, sure. Now, we're not joined today by two other people. These are folks that are on the committee who are also recognized, and that's Herb Bailey and Dr. Henry, I want to say this correct. Asen, Dr. Henry Asen. They have been really loyal members of the committee, and we will get them some recognition, but they weren't able to join us here this morning. And finally, I would love to hear a few words from Sidna. I warned her this was coming, so she had 10 minutes to prepare, but just a few closing words on this presentation. And again, my gratitude on behalf of the people of Oklahoma City to you and your committee for all that you do. It really is awesome. Yeah, let's hear it for them. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I don't know what to say. I've said so many things up here for so many years that what a great city we live in. Above everything else, what a great city we live in. We have a wonderful mayor who is doing everything he can to make sure that we have a very inclusive city and an accessible city. Excuse me. And we've assembled a wonderful team of people who come to the table every month to work on behalf of people with disabilities in this great city. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Okay, if our folks that are here for Arts and Humanities Month might come forward, and I know that's quite a few, and that's quite all right. You just come on up. Oh, you're fine.
Congratulations. Thank you. Again, thank you. Oh, no problem.
It took me 4 times then to get mine.
This is
Wow. Never in the history of our city have so many creative people been joined together in one place like this. This is awesome. All right. Well, it is Arts and Humanities Month, and I would like to have the clerk read this proclamation proclaiming such.
Whereas the month of October has been recognized as National Arts and Humanities Month by thousands of arts, humanities, and cultural organizations, communities, and states across the country. And whereas since our earliest days, Oklahoma City has flourished because of the creative spirit and vision of our residents. We rely on the arts and humanities to broaden our views and our understanding of the nation and world. The arts and humanities play an important role in telling our city's story and reminding us of the truths that connect us. And whereas the insight that comes from watching a thought-provoking documentary or discovering a compelling novel sparks moments of joy, awe, and sorrow. From symphonies that bring tragedy to life to architecture that challenges the boundaries of the world around it, these works add texture to our lives and reveal the spirit of our city. And whereas cultivating the talents and minds of our young people and ensuring they have access to the arts and humanities are critical to our city's growth and prosperity. To meet the challenges ahead, we must harness the skills and ingenuity of our children and grandchildren by providing equitable access to the arts and humanities and instill in them the same passion and persistence that has driven our city's progress and innovation. And whereas this month we pay tribute to the tremendous power of the arts and humanities to bring us together and expose us to new ideas. As we carry forward this proud tradition, let us celebrate the ways our city's rich heritage has socially and economically strengthened our state and inspired our lives. And whereas the late Robbie Kinzel worked tirelessly in her role as Oklahoma City's first arts liaison in the Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs to expand the influence of the arts and humanities on the lives of all residents of Oklahoma City through planning, placemaking, and public art initiatives. Now, therefore, I, David Holt, Mayor of the City of Oklahoma City, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2022 to be Arts and Humanities Month in remembrance of Robbie Kinzel in Oklahoma City, and call upon residents to celebrate and encourage greater participation in the arts and humanities in our neighborhood schools and all areas across our city.
Well, very good. Thank you. We have some comments now. Unfortunately, not everyone will be allowed to speak, and I know that's probably tough for some members of this crowd. But we have some designated spokespeople, and we will start with Allison Bartabaly, the current chair of the Oklahoma City Arts Commission.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for being here this morning. Last year, I spoke about how the pandemic helped us appreciate art for its quality of life benefits, and it's very much easier to quantify economic impact. Those are easier things to talk about as it relates to city government and our Arts Commission's oversight of our public collection. But public art is also added to our community to generate thought and instigate an emotional response at an individual level too. I read an article once that described public art as a venue for collective emotion, and I liked that. Whether it's grief or joy or anger or silliness or healing, everyone doesn't have to feel the same thing about the exact same piece at the same time. In the upcoming fall weather, I challenge each of you to find a piece of public art in the city and to sit with it. Be introspective, recognize how the piece makes you feel, and appreciate the moment that the artist gave with their work. Thank you.
You need a proper introduction. Caroline Lowry, Executive Director of Oklahoma Humanities.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me be here with you today. It's my distinct honor to be here as the mayor proclaims October Arts and Humanities Month across the city. The arts and the humanities complement each other to work together to more comprehensively tell the story of us, the human story. Our customs, our cultures, our community stories are more adequately preserved and shared when individuals and leaders invest in the arts and humanities and see the vital impact they have in our communities. I want to thank the mayor and the city council and all of you who support projects like the Maps 4 Clara Looper Center. Those kinds of humanities-based public projects help us learn from our past to inspire our futures. And Oklahoma City has a very rich history of public investment in the arts and humanities, in no small part due to Robbie, who this proclamation is dedicated to today. So with that, I thank you for being with us today, and go forth, have a creative and contemplative Arts and Humanities Month.
Perfectly said. Let's hear it for the humanities, everybody. All right, thank you all. Thank you all so much.
Down to the front steps for a photo. Down to the front steps for a photo.
Oh, thank you. All right, our Teacher of the Month, please come forward. All right. Well, this morning we have Delois Bird, and I wonder, there we go. All right. From Putnam City Schools, and we'd love to learn a little bit more about you, and so I would ask the clerk to read this resolution.
Whereas Delois Bird has been named Teacher of the Month for October 2022 by Putnam City Public Schools and Rotary Club of Oklahoma City. And whereas Delois received her bachelor's degree in elementary education from Cameron University and a master's degree in curriculum and instruction through Western Governors University in 2018. And whereas Delois began her teaching career in Lawton, which is where she grew up. And whereas Delois taught as a classroom teacher for 10 years, teaching 2nd through 5th grade for Lawton Public Schools and Oklahoma City Public Schools. And whereas Delois has taught elementary special education for the past 5 years and currently serves on Putnam City Schools Student Experience and Equity Council. And whereas Delois was named Putnam City Schools Teacher of the Year in 2022, and whereas Delois feels strongly that building positive relationships with students is the most important part of her job. And whereas Delois accomplishes all of this with the support of her wonderful boyfriend, Jordan. Now therefore be it resolved by the Mayor and Council of the City of Oklahoma City that they do hereby recognize and commend Delois Bird on her selection as October 2022 Teacher of the Month by Putnam City Public Schools and Rotary Club of Oklahoma City.
Thank you. A couple things not mentioned in the resolution, but Delois is at Arbor Grove. Also, Jordan is the first boyfriend to make one of these, and I think that's a lot of pressure, just want to say. But no, we're so grateful for all that you do for our kids. And of course, worth noting, you are Putnam City Schools Teacher of the Year. That's kind of a big deal. Not as big a deal as being Teacher of the Month here at City Hall, but pretty big deal. And so obviously you are doing a terrific job and you're being recognized for it. Now, we would like to add to that recognition by passing this resolution. This is a little different. That other stuff you saw early, mere proclamations. You are a resolution, which means that you have to be voted upon. So let's see if we can get a motion in a second. We've got it. Cast your votes. I wish to vote aye. So, passes unanimously. Yes. Well, thank you so much for what you do, and we would love to hear a few words from you if you don't mind.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor Holt. Thank you, City Council. I just want to acknowledge some of the people here in the audience with me, my wonderful boyfriend, Jordan, and Dr. Mamoli, who is the Chief of Staff for Putnam City Schools, Jana Bauer, who is my principal at Arbor Grove Elementary, Alex Picard, who is the Director of Putnam City Schools Foundation. And I just want to thank you all for appreciating the work that teachers do. We work hard, and I'm just one of many.
Indeed. Let's hear it for Delois. Thank you. Nice voice to keep. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, that concludes the presentations, but not quite the office of the mayor. We now have a few other items to handle. The first is item 3B. This is a notification that Councilwoman Jo Beth Hammond will serve as vice mayor for the 6-month period beginning on October 13th, so that is Thursday. Why don't we handle that item separately? I guess we vote on a notification. I think we usually do. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. And item 3C and 3D, we could probably take together. These are appointments. We have appointment of Debbie Hampton to serve on the Oklahoma City County Board of Health, and an appointment of Waylon Cubitt to serve as a member of the Oklahoma City Housing Authority.
Just had a couple questions
Sure.
as we look at this and these appointments. I'm just kind of curious as to even to the last appointments that we've had through the last few times we've appointed, where exactly the appointments came from. And the reason I ask is because I know there have been a few of us that have suggested and asked for others to be appointed to certain boards, trusts, and commissions to no avail and no discussion of why or why not, or if there could be another suggestion, which, totally understand. This is your appointment as the presiding officer and the mayor, but especially in these types of appointments when a few of us serve in certain capacities where there is the representation, it seems as if some of those thoughts and ideas would at least be taken into account when in fact, unfortunately, they're not. So I'm just kind of curious as to where we are with it. Not to say I fully have in opposition to these particular appointments, but I am quite curious as to, again, why. In a lot of ways, we have people that are continuing to serve on multiple boards, trusts, and commissions that have already been appointed through our city. And again, the fact that for another board, I know for sure there was an ask for some other folks to be considered.
Sure. So the only suggestion I'm aware of in regards to these two appointments was made by a different council member, and I did speak to that council member at length about that and worked through that. Ultimately, any at-large appointments to all boards and commissions as per the charter, well, actually technically all appointments are the mayor's prerogative, obviously subject to approval by the council, but at-large appointments by custom have always been exclusively the prerogative of the mayor. I have followed the custom of my predecessors by 100% of the time accepting the suggestions of the council members for their ward-specific appointments, and we actually had a conversation about that at the last meeting, and I've continued that custom. But with the other appointments, that is what the mayor is elected to do. And I always appreciate recommendations from council members, and I certainly consider them, absolutely. But ultimately, I'm going to make the appointment I think is best for the people of Oklahoma City. Are there any other comments or questions?
I have my last comment. According to that, I understand we're making the best recommendation for the city, but I would hope that we would look at other people that could be considered instead of having the same people serve on the same boards, commissions, and trusts. When in fact, again, we have multiple people that can be considered. And we've added how many thousand people to Oklahoma City from the last census count? I think that means we have more people that are willing and able to serve on boards, trusts, and commissions. So I'd just like for that consideration to go forward as we move forward with further appointments.
Sure. I'd like to clarify, it is very rare for people to serve on more than one city-appointed board. There is one of the two appointments here today who serves on one other appointment, but that is not very common, and I think it's important to clarify that. All right, are there any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we could take a motion for both appointments together. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 3E is a resolution approving travel expenses for me to attend the National League of Cities City Summit in Kansas City, Missouri later in November. We could take a motion on that. This requires 6 affirmative votes per the charter. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. That concludes Office of the Mayor, finally at 9:05, which finally brings us to items from council, of which there are none today. And so we proceed to item 5, City Manager reports. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. We have Chris Tatham here with us today from ETC Institute. They've conducted our annual resident survey, and he's going to give us an update and a report on the results of the survey from this year.
Great. Well, Mayor and members of the council, it's great to be back. You've been doing this survey almost every year now since 2005. So you've been through the last major economic recession and challenges we had. We've now been through COVID, yet the city of Oklahoma City continues to perform well, particularly compared to other communities. So what I'm going to today is just give you the highlights. I think most of you are familiar with the firm, with our firm, ETC Institute, but if you're not, we are the national leader in doing research for local governments across the country. This is just what I like to call our gee-whiz maps that shows the location of many of the communities that are our clients. We've actually done surveys of more than 3 million people now in the last decade for 1,000 communities or more than 1,000 communities around the globe. And so some of the comments I make today are going to be based on how you stack up to other folks. I'm going to walk you through briefly the purpose and methodology. I know many of you are familiar with that, but just to remind you, and I want to make sure that you feel comfortable with the survey results because you're the ones who ultimately use it for decision making. So that's really part of my goal today. Then there's a lot of information in the report, so I'm going to highlight what I consider to be the 3 most significant findings, and then I'll share a few other things that we found in the survey this year. For those of you who are familiar with it, really this is an objective way to get input from residents. You'll hear from people at public meetings, and that's a very important part of the process. But the average resident typically is too busy to show up at meetings and let you know what they think about the quality of services and priorities. So this is a way to make sure that their voice of the average resident is heard. We use it also to give you some ideas of what people think the priorities for the community should be, and frankly help you track performance over time, particularly when we have crises like COVID. How did that change the community? How did it change expectations and so forth? As far as the methodology, we use a similar methodology that we've used for really now about 17 years. We've been selecting a random sample of residents in each of the city's wards, trying to ensure that we get at least 150 respondents from each ward so that the data for each of you on the council is statistically significant. We now use all sorts of methods that'll let people participate. We send people texts, we send them emails, we even put Facebook ads, but we make sure that the respondent has an address that was randomly selected. So that's how we control the sample to make sure it's valid. The overall results aren't perfect, but they have an accuracy of about plus or minus 2.5% at the 95% level of confidence. And that just means if we did the survey 100 times, 95 times out of 100, we get these same results within about 3% or less. So it's very, very accurate. With that said, I want to make sure that you know that it's representative of the community. One of the things that we monitor is the demographic composition. We try to make sure we get good representation by age, which you can see in this pie is very close. You can see we get good representation by gender. We also have very good representation based on the races and ethnicities in the community compared to recent census estimates. We also have good representation from all household income groups and, of course, geography. You can see the red dots on the map. So we don't actually go down to the person's address, so it remains confidential, but we make sure that we have good information based on the block location where the person lives. So having done the survey for you many times and assessed the results over many years, I believe you can have a lot of confidence that this year's survey, once again, do really reflect what the people in Oklahoma City think about city services and community priorities. So with that said, here's what I'd be the takeaways. Number 1, this is another year to celebrate how well you've done. Last year, what was interesting is the city, I found when you have a crisis in Oklahoma City, somehow your results go the opposite direction instantly as the rest of the nation. You might remember I was here a year ago, you actually got better in a lot of things while everyone else started getting worse. Now that COVID's gotten over, you've seen some correction, but you're still outperforming the national average in many, many areas, and there's a lot of things to be very proud of. Second thing is there are things to celebrate. There have been some declines in the areas. I want to share those with you. One of the areas that you have not declined in, though, is your street maintenance, which is one of the most important issues and priorities to residents. So things that are important to folks you've actually done even better in, and the priorities haven't changed a lot. That's one of the things that's interesting. Many communities saw radical shifts in their priorities as a result of COVID. Years have not changed now that we're getting to the point where COVID's still around, but not the way it was a couple years ago. So with that, let me kind of share some of the major findings. The first is that you're setting the standard in many, many areas. What you'll see on this chart is ratings for the city as a place to live, work, raise children, visit, and to retire. The blue bar is where Oklahoma City's ratings are. Our national average for communities with more than 250,000 residents is in the gray, and the national average for all communities is in red. You'll notice that compared to other communities, you're setting a standard across the board. One item that should have been on this chart that's not is people's rating of the city moving in the right direction. The overall result for Oklahoma City, 69%. The national average is now just 39%. You're 30 points above the national average when it comes to the view that residents have regarding the direction the city is moving. And that's probably why you get so many good ratings in these key areas that I consider to be the strategic indicators of a community's health. When it comes to many of your other public services that you provide, you'll see on here that across the board, whether it's fire, trash, ambulance, police, city water utilities, your parks and recreation, customer service, and communication, you're doing a great job compared to the national and the regional averages. The one area that you lag behind, where you have lagged behind in the past, is the condition of streets, but I'm going to show you in a little bit, that's actually an area that improved, one of the highlights compared to a year ago. The other thing that I want you to point out here is the police services at 72%. The national average for large cities is now just 44%. It dropped 15% over the last 2 years. A lot of large cities are having really big challenges with perceptions of police. Oklahoma City's ratings have held steady, and I'll show that to you as well in just a little bit. And I really want to highlight your utility services and solid waste services, as across the board you'll see that you're setting the standard not just by 10% or 15%, but look at the gaps here. Residential trash collection services, you're at 90%. Nationally is just 50%. So 9 out of 10 folks in Oklahoma City give positive ratings compared to less than 6 out of 10 in most community or most large cities. So again, in these services are where you have a lot of customer service interaction, which is probably one of the reasons your customer service ratings compare so favorably. In addition, your overall perceptions of the community rate very well. I want to highlight the one that says how well the city is planning growth. I know you've seen, I heard that just recently, you've been growing a lot. Compared to the national average, you're at 51% giving satisfaction or planning growth when you're in a community that's really growing. That's hard to do. That suggests you're doing a lot of things really well. You can see nationally for large cities, it's just 28%. You will notice that feeling of safety, though, is an area that's lagging. And this is interesting because the issue for police ratings are significantly above the national average, but feelings of safety are below. And you might say, well, what's causing that? We took a look at a lot of the comments that we have. Issues related to homelessness are one of the things that are causing people to feel less safe in different parts of the city. And so that's one of the things that we saw this year that we've seen more than in previous years. And it's particularly affecting when we looked at this feeling of safety in particular parts of the community. You'll see in parks, the city ranks very well compared to other communities, but the concerns are more in the downtown area where people are experiencing that. So again, that's some of the things that we found out when it comes to how you stack up. But one of the reasons you bring me in here is to kind of give you what I like to say, here's what it is. And the reality is compared to last year, things are a little bit lower. So though you're setting the standard, nationally we've seen shift go much lower. And this is one of the things I want to highlight. Most areas held steady, which was a great accomplishment compared to a year ago. You might say, well, why did that happen? Well, as the world opened up, people's expectations for services have returned to pre-COVID levels. So people are now expecting what they expected before COVID, and in some cases even more, because people expected local governments to get lots of money from the federal government. In many cases, there are higher expectations now than we've ever seen, which is the reason I believe many of the results have dropped. But what I want to do is highlight here perhaps one of the most significant things to me, because there's no arrow on it. It's police services, which is the fourth one down from the top. You'll notice before COVID, where we did your survey right at the very beginning, you're at 71. You went to 73, back to 72. You might say, well, that doesn't seem like a big deal. But the national average for large cities has dropped 15 percentage points since 2020. And so something is different here in Oklahoma City with regard to the view that people have of your police. So you can see expectations for customer service. Those have risen, but your overall ratings for customer service, remember, are still significantly better than a national average. Same thing with communication. Your public transportation, there's rising expectations there as well, and same thing on code enforcement. What's interesting on code enforcement, and we have a mixed result. Some areas got a lot better. Other areas got worse. I'll show those to you in just a little bit. In fact, here's some of the specifics. Compared to 2021, Some of the biggest increases in the survey, or most improvements, were the enforcement of cleanup of junk and debris on private property, mowing and cutting weeds on private property, your bulky item pickup services, condition of neighborhood streets, which was one of your top priorities in the last three. Also, the condition of major streets went up significantly, athletic leads offered by the city, and trash services. Those are areas that we saw significant improvement compared to a year ago. When we look at the decreases, though, you'll notice the enforcement of yard parking regulations and sign regulations went down, animal control went down. Your planning for growth went lower, but remember the chart I showed you a little bit ago, comparatively, you're still significantly better than the national average. Downtown ratings were a little bit lower, as far along as with your efforts to remove abandoned vehicles and local traffic law enforcement. When we ask people why they were dissatisfied with the enforcement of traffic laws, it's not that you're giving too many tickets. It's the opposite. We actually asked people, not enough citations are giving. 8 out of 10 people who were dissatisfied with that issue felt that there should be more citations. If you start giving more citations, though, you're going to have people more call you up, why am I getting citations? But right there, that's where you're at. Part of the reason you do the survey is to kind of balance what is it that residents expect. So moving forward, the third thing, there are opportunities for improvement. The biggest finding from here is they have not changed radically. In some communities, issues that were not important in previous surveys are suddenly off the chart. A good example of that is police services. Many communities had very positive ratings for police services before COVID. Their ratings have plummeted and the priority has gone off the rot. And so it's gone from a relatively low opportunity for improvement to the #1 issue in many large cities in the country. In your case, your issues related to traffic flow, which have a lot to do with your growth, condition of your streets, continue to be at the top, followed by code enforcement, and then your public transit system kind of round out your top priorities moving forward. As far as a couple things that I thought would be interesting for you, this to me was a very interesting finding because it's very different than I'm seeing in most other large cities. One of the things I looked at is we asked people if they had contact with a City of Oklahoma police officer in the last 3 years, did they think they were treated fairly by the officer? Citywide, it was at 90%. I then did some analysis based on race because there are significant differences based on race in most communities in the United States. But I'll take a look in the bottom box. Statistically, the differences were not significant. So all in all, regardless of people's race, their perceptions of how they were treated by the police, if they had had contact with the police, were about the same. And I thought that was very, very interesting, given what I see in other communities. A few other things is 4 in 10 residents reported they had problems with stray dogs in their neighborhood. 3 in 4 said they had used city parks, so relatively high utilization. It's 2 out of 3 in most communities. And then we asked people where they're getting their information about the city. And you can see city news letter is at the top of the source, followed by the website is third. So a lot of the information that people get about the city is actually coming from the city, and that's a really good position to be in. That way you can keep people informed about the issues and things that they probably need to know the most about. So Mayor, members of the council, just to summarize, I know you don't have any cake or parties left because the mariachi band is gone. Maybe that was to celebrate this. But when you're 30% above the national average when it comes to people's perceptions of the direction the city is headed after COVID, when your police department ratings have remained the same, when the national average is falling 15%, when your ratings for a city as a place to live, raise children, those other factors are double digits compared to other large communities, you're doing something right. But you still have issues to do and issues to address. The city maintenance has been there a long time. It's still going to be there. Public transit, code enforcement, things like that are important. But again, congratulations. You're coming on the backside of COVID. And though some things have decreased, your decreases are generally much less than we've seen in other large cities. And all in all, you appear to be on the right direction based on my analysis of the data. So, Mayor, I don't know if anyone has any questions, but I'd be happy to answer them if there are.
I guess the question I would have is, in the last 10 years, we've heard a lot of people say Oklahoma City is experiencing rapid growth, job diversification, people moving to Oklahoma City. What impact does that have on the survey itself when you're in a period of rapid growth?
Sure. Usually, what we normally see is issues related to planning for growth and traffic flow become much more significant to folks. So as you grow, there's more cars on the streets, and as there are more cars on the streets, people get more sensitive to traffic flow. And that's probably one of the reasons that you see traffic flow as one of your top issues. But when it comes to the planning for growth, most communities that are experiencing a lot of growth do that very poorly. And as a result, even though we saw a little decrease in your ratings from last year to this year, your overall satisfaction rating for planning for growth was over 50%, and the national average is just 28%. So you're doing that comparatively really well.
The other thing, in looking at the 2021 executive summary, 85% of the people last year viewed Oklahoma City as a great place to live, 82% great place to work, and 76% great place to raise your children. I think that number came down a little on raising the children, and so could you take a look at that and get back to us with some information on what's driving that? I mean, the number's still great, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, one of the biggest factors I can just tell you is education in public schools. Because of COVID, that's had a big impact nationally. My guess is that's likely to have been a factor here as well, but we'd be happy to look at that.
Thank you.
How many surveys did you send out?
We select 5 times, so in this case, it would be 750 from each of the wards. And so we get anywhere from probably 15 to 25% back from each of the wards. So it'd be 750 times 8, so whatever that math is. So
I just saw that you had 1343 returned.
yeah, we had 13, so our goal is to get 150 completed, so it's a 20% target out of the 750 that are selected.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Go ahead.
And I apologize, you may have already told us this, but can you provide the breakdown by ward of the results?
Sure, they'll all be between about 100, everyone has at least 150, and I think the one ward might have maybe 190, but it's between about 150 and 200 per ward.
Well, I meant the responses. You know,
Oh, yes, absolutely. In fact,
Okay.
those will, if you don't have them yet, they're coming, so.
Great, thank you. So, not your particular polling, but sometimes polling tries to push respondents to one answer or another. Are yours fairly non-biased? I mean,
Yeah, we work really hard with the number of people to try to hire our firm to help their campaigns is off the charts, but we stay out of local politics. We don't design our surveys for political agenda. The questions are pretty much the same year after year in community after community. You know, we might call a creek a wash in Phoenix, but it'll be a similar question.
Yeah.
And our goal really is I've found that having done this for 20 years, if I'm honest and transparent each time, over time, it'll give you better data to work with. But we don't have a political agenda. It's really much more to give you the way it is. But
And I
you're
would say
absolutely
too,
right,
I think we
yeah.
see that in our results, that in some areas, you know, like with streets, you know, we could possibly go and ask the questions in a different way to try to elicit a more positive response, but I think we get lower ratings on streets and we just acknowledged it and we're trying to address it. And in other areas it's higher, but we try to be consistent in the way we've asked the questions from year after year.
Craig, I've got a homeowners meeting tonight. Can you give me some ideas as to how to address those in a more positive way?
I would love to.
Just one more question, I think. A couple of things that you mentioned. One, the concern over lack of enforcement in terms of traffic laws. I do think that's a concern, and it's partly due to our low numbers in terms of police officers. They just don't have the personnel available to monitor speeding, appropriate stops at traffic signals, stop signs, things like that. And again, that's a common issue among homeowners associations, is the speeding within the neighborhood. And we can send a police officer out there for a day or so, and that'll curtail the speeding temporarily, but then it picks back up. So one final thing, what, in your opinion, is deemed to be a significant improvement for the condition of neighborhood streets and the main streets? You said that while we still have a relatively low perception, it's improved. So how much did it improve? Because
off the top of my head, I don't remember the exact number, but it was more than 2%. It seems like a small number, but your sample size, if we saw a change of more than 2% or 3%, it was significant. So that's
from
why I
a
flagged
statistical standpoint.
It was, yes.
Yeah.
but you have it, but it's still on the lower end of ratings. So there's you're moving in the right direction, but a long ways to go.
Well, I'll take that tonight and use that as my opening statement. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I have just a few comments I want to make. And I think to Councilman Greenwell's point about the enforcement of traffic laws, that's something I hear all the time when I talk to neighborhoods and individuals. And, you know, I think in my mind, our sort of audit, and what people often ask is, yes, can a police officer come sit by the certain intersection or on a certain street to curtail potential speeding or et cetera? And I just always have to kind of stop and think about that because, one, people talk about there's sort of this, I guess it's not really true for folks that were responding to this, but that we're a dangerous place to live. And so I always wonder what people mean by dangerous because that's a very broad, loaded word. But my mind is always that investing in prevention and changing people's behavior is going to be better than investing in reaction. And when we think about having a police officer sit on a certain street, to Councilman Greenwell's point, maybe it stops for a little while, but once they're gone, that behavior goes back to what the behavior was before. Whereas if we could invest in traffic calming measures and actually build our streets to change people's behaviors, we actually prevent the need for, or, you know, it's not like all speeding is going to disappear, but having speed bumps, little mini roundabouts in people's neighborhoods, building even our arterial streets with more traffic lights, narrower lanes, like all of these things help with traffic calming and prevent the need to then even, or at least decrease probably the need, I should say, because again, people are still gonna probably speed and those sorts of things, but decrease the level at which people will break those traffic laws and then need a reactive response versus that preventative response. So I guess if anything that my mind goes to is that, you know, we have this alternate speed abatement program that the Traffic Commission has been looking at for a long time, and I know staff has been has on their list to kind of move through the process to approve, but there's no funding for it. We're not prioritizing putting funding behind it, but in my mind, this is one of the things that I hear about all the time when I'm talking to neighborhoods and different people in the community, and it just doesn't make sense to me to not put some dollars behind installing, giving neighborhoods the opportunity to pilot some of these things, because that speed bump is going to be there today, tomorrow, next month, next year. Maybe, you know, it's going to need updates or, you know, like patches or whatever, as any infrastructure does, but it's way more of a cost-effective use of our public dollars than having a person sit on that street for a day or two and then being gone and conditions go back to normal. The other thing I want to kind of point out and mention, because I always feel the need to say this explicitly when the idea of danger and safety and homelessness is correlated. I recognize and I understand that for many people, seeing someone experiencing homelessness or maybe carrying all their possessions with them, perception that they are homeless or in extreme poverty, there is a fear of that person as other and potentially dangerous, but the data does not play that out. Someone experiencing homelessness is more likely to have someone hurt them than to hurt other people because of the vulnerable position they are often in. And do people experiencing homelessness hurt other people? Yes, it does happen, but so do people that live in homes. So I always feel the need to explicitly say that, because I fear that our reaction is, okay, there is a perception, it is people's perception, which I recognize as their reality, but we need to have those conversations to break down those perceptions and those assumptions so that we actually respond with the necessary and appropriate response to those needs in the community through livable wages, housing wages, actually attainable and affordable housing, all of the support services, the access to jobs, access to services, all those sorts of things, versus this, well, maybe if we can just get them to disappear, people will feel safe again, because that's just moving the issue into another part of the city where people will continue to not feel safe. So I know that's not like a reflection of what you are just reporting what the findings are, but I just always feel the need to say that out loud, especially for anyone watching, that I've had individual experiences where I've been afraid of someone that is experiencing homelessness, but that is the tiny, like, exception to the rule. I always feel the need to say that out loud, that people that are homeless, people that are experiencing mental illness, are statistically much more likely to be harmed and to have violence done to them than the other way around. So I get that it can be scary. It can be hard to understand how to talk to your children about seeing people experiencing homelessness in our city and maybe in our downtown in particular. But that by and large, they are not going to harm you, and that it maybe is a good opportunity to have a conversation about what we can be doing as a community to really provide the resources and the appropriate responses to help those folks kind of gain some stability back in their life. So thank you.
I just wanted to say, as we look at some of those numbers, and especially for the responses, I received a survey to my cell phone and was asked to fill it out and complete it. So those are the things that make me curious when we have to look at who is asked to participate in these types of surveys and to respond. And also the fact that as we look at the minority groups who are much less, who barely make up probably 40 to 45% of this survey, that is going to skew a lot of what we're looking at, especially the slide that showed the responses from minority groups in relation to police interactions. And because that group of even African Americans to this complete survey was 14%, and then we had an 86% number to say how they responded, that does not add up in a way to say these are actual things that are happening in specific communities. Specifically, again, because I say, if I received that type of survey, I can only imagine who else probably received it, would be, in my opinion, and I could be totally wrong, those who are active, those who are engaged, those who are able to respond in a way and have that knowledge of what's happening in some aspects of city government, not all aspects, but some aspects of city government. So in my opinion, that is clearly going to skew how even those groups are going to respond and say what is happening. So I am very, very interested to see, as far as those specific numbers broken down by minority group, how they respond specifically to each question.
And I'll just say, it's a random sample. So it's great that you got selected, but you were not selected because you're a council member or anything else like that. The way we do this election is we select 750 addresses at random from all the residential addresses in each ward. I don't know whether those people are rich or poor, black or white, or council, not council. They are random simply based on their residential address. That's the key selection factor. We then follow up with those phones with emails, with texts. We send postcards. We even put information out on Facebook so that when people see it, they're like, oh, this survey is legitimate. The way we validate that our random sample is actually representative is we look at the composition of our sample compared to the census. And 14% is the percentage of African Americans in the city, so that's what we ended up with the citywide. It may not be perfect from one ward to the next, but citywide it is representative, and a sample of 14% out of 1,300 is well over 150 respondents, which is itself a statistically significant subsample. So whether they're the Asians or the Hispanics or the African Americans, there was a statistically significant sample of them, so that when I do some analysis by it, there's a significant margin of error, and I grant you that, but I do these surveys all over the country. And I see and look at the data from race to race to race, whether it be in Mecklenburg County, who I just talked to an hour ago because they had some concerns about their results, so I was looking at them right before I walked in here, or whether it be San Antonio or Austin or Las Vegas or Kansas City. We do work with all these large cities. What is extremely unique in your results this year is there were not dramatic differences between the percentage perceptions of racial groups and the police. That's the only one that I really looked at, but they have been dramatically different across the United States. I think there's something happening in the city in that area that's good with regard to the way your police and different racial groups interact. There's probably still a lot of problems. We see that. But at the end of the day, there is something significantly different here. And that's one of the reasons we prepared a dashboard and some other things so we can drill down and help you understand. But I want to make sure that you all understand that this data is about as representative of your community as it gets. And that's why we do a really extensive effort to make sure that when you use it, it really is representative of your community. So that's, I guess, Councilmember, I understand your concerns, but I want you to understand that our firm's entire reputation is based on making sure you get good statistically valid data. So if you don't believe that, then you won't use the data, which is what I hope you'll end up ultimately doing moving forward. But I do appreciate your comment and understand your concern.
And I appreciate you for responding in the way that you did. And again, that's why I'm very eager to read specifically as far as ward specific and group, ethnic group specific, what those responses are.
And there are some significant differences at the ward level. So when you do drill down, you will notice that some areas get really great ratings, in some areas don't. Tonight I didn't break into those details, but it is important as you look for it, you will see some of those differences.
I appreciate that. And hopefully, depending on what those are, we may be able to have you back and compare those to other cities that you have experienced as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate the work that you all do and the help that you give us in understanding the data. I really feel like as you look at this, even when you look at, we've seen some decline, it's not as much as what we've seen in the rest of the country. We don't want to just excuse that as, oh, everything's okay. But I do think having those numbers that rate where they are compared to the national averages is really a reflection of the work that our city employees do every single day. And so I think the credit really goes back into the city employees and the work that they do, and we need to make sure to acknowledge that. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's all that, we have one more report that's on, it's our transfers report. So we do administrative transfers within the budget. We put a report on every year. It's the annual report that is on from last fiscal year. If there's any questions as you look at those, feel free to ask.
Hey, Craig, excuse me.
Yes.
I do have a question on that. Do we have a total, I see this broken down by various funds, but did this have a net impact on our adjusted budget? It went up, it went down, it stayed the same?
So administratively, we can't increase the overall budget. That's only with the council and at certain category levels. So this is movement within those categories. So it did not increase the overall.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. We'll move on then to item 6, Journal of Council Proceedings. We have items A and B we could take with one motion. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes if you are able. I don't have anything on my screen, but I would like to vote aye. No. All right, passes unanimously. Okay, item 7 is request for uncontested continuances. We have item 11J that is deferred here on the agenda. What else might we have, Mr. City Manager?
On page 2 on the MFA docket, we did have one typo that we made where we had noted something as, it was item MFA B. We had noted it as at Ward 6. It's actually Ward 3. And so we just had a correction on that. It doesn't change anything on the item, but just for clarification. And then on page 20, under item 11R1, all of these items will be stricken from the agenda. This is on unsecured structures. Item D, 1217 West Reno Avenue. The owner is secured. Item E, 405 Southwest 11th Street. The owner is secured. Item J, 808 Northwest 31st Street. The owner is secured. And item T, 1416 Southwest 68th Street. The owner has secured. Then on abandoned buildings on page 20 on item 11S, these items are all stricken from the agenda. Item C, 1217 West Reno Avenue. Item E, 405 Southwest 11th Street. Item H, 808 Northwest 31st Street. And item P, 1416 Southwest 68th Street. That's all the items that I have.
All right. We're now at item 8, revocable permits and events. Item 8A is a revocable permit with Front Row Promotions for Polo on the River, October 15th, 16th, 19th, 30th, and November 18th and 19th, using River Park. No one has signed up to speak, but they are here nonetheless. Go ahead, state your name and address.
Good morning, thank you. I'm Kelly Cold Iron, and I believe I need to spell my name and tell my address. Yes? No?
No? Okay, you don't need to spell it, but yes, your address would be great, since we don't have a sheet for you especially.
Okay, my address is 335505 East 930 Road in Wellston, Oklahoma, 74881.
Thank you.
And I am Kelly Cold Iron, and I'm here to ask for the revocable permit for Polo on the River. This is an opportunity to test a program in River Park, 33-acre park that is right beside the river and just north of the Stockyard City. And this is an opportunity to bring new patrons into the stockyards, as well as help the community that finds itself in the river park at times, which is the homeless. We have an opportunity to do a coat drive in November. There are 3 dates set. The first date set is this coming weekend, if we can make it happen. The next date is for the 29th and 30th, 2 weeks later. And then the third date would be the 19th, which is a Friday and a Saturday in November. The dates coincide with the Stockyard Stampede that's coming this weekend on the 15th. And then also the last date coincides with the tree lighting that goes along with the Stockyards activities there in the district and the city. And truly, this is about bringing an opportunity for a new sport to the city of Tulsa. The polo community is strong in this area. We are all from Western backgrounds. A lot of newcomers do ride English. We have some good input from lots of different types of riders. But what is driving this opportunity is a place to come in an outdoor setting in River Park and bring an agricultural education opportunity and equestrian showcasing. Or we have an option to show and tell the different breeds and animals and various disciplines. We have an opportunity to educate the local community and anybody in the surrounding areas about ag education. The mezzanette is set to come on Saturday. We have a lot of pumpkins and sales and some turkeys coming, if all this can go through. And then we also have 2 polo matches, which is a tournament, all governed by the United States Polo Association as well. There are a couple of groups that are supporting in the area. The Nexus Equine group, I've talked to Rita. She's very interested in helping and supporting because we are going to showcase as our goals various equestrian breeds and various ways to use animals and horses in your own work and in sports as well. Horticulture is very important to me as well. There's many beautiful trees on the park, and they've been trimmed up. They're nicely laid out now, and what we're hoping to do is to put some signs underneath them and educate people of what the trees are that are exactly there, and then potentially in the future do some beautification with just some planting of color in the area. This focus is to test this and make sure everybody's happy with it this fall. And then as it's successful and we get together over the winter, then this next year I'd like to have the opportunity maybe to bring this once a month at least to the park so we can have a continued program. It will not be completely accomplished in 3 events, but it's a good opportunity to test it, as I mentioned, and then move forward to next year as well.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hammond?
Yeah, it sounds like a neat and very unique offering. I'm excited that it will be, there are a few different opportunities to engage with it over the next couple months, so I will move for approval.
It's fine. I still don't have anything.
While we're waiting, can I just offer a suggestion?
Yes.
That perhaps you visit with the State Fair Board and see what kind of joint activities you two could become involved with. One, because of the close proximity between the polo grounds and the State Fair grounds. And 2, with the emphasis on horses, it just seemed like a natural fit and that they could be a strong supporter of this program and other Stockyards events.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm told we have a motion and a second. I would like to vote aye. Passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, we've made it to page 2. 8B, revocable permit with the Riversport Foundation for the Riversport Duathlon on November 6th. No one has signed up to speak. Council members Hammond and Nice.
I was actually wondering what this is, so I guess we'll find out on November the 6th. But with that, if nothing, I'll move for approval.
All right, I'm back in action. We've got a motion and a second. Cast your votes.
My screen is stuck. I will vote aye.
Okay. Passes unanimously. Okay, item 8C is a revocable right-of-way use permit with Downtown OKC Partnership to hold Bricktown Trick or Treat on October 24th, and Justin O'Neill is here.
Good morning. Talking Brick or Treat today. We're going to hold it on Monday, October 24th. It's surprising that Halloween is already upon us. It does feel like it outside today, though, so getting a little closer. This year, we are requesting to shut down Mickey Mantle Drive between Sheridan and Reno. Last year, or previous years before COVID, the expected attendance was around 5,000. Last year, our first one post-COVID, we had over 14,500 people on our pedestrian counters, which made for an interesting time of people navigating the district and crossing streets. And so we've been working heavily with the Oklahoma City Police Department to ensure everyone's safety. Close those streets is a big part of it. We're going to have officers as well as green team members posted at different intersections, helping people cross traffic and try to really slow down incoming cars into the district. But it'll be a great event. We have over 35 candy stops as well as activation going on throughout the district. It'll be a really great representation. It's a favorite event of Bricktown community. They love to see all the kids in costumes and things like that. But I'll take any questions if anyone has any.
Any questions? If not, Councilwoman Nice.
I don't have any questions, but I have a suggestion. If you're going to have over 14,000 people, you might need more than 35 candy stops.
It'll be interesting.
I know it will, so I hope for 20,000 this year, especially with us blocking off this area. So I know this will be a great event, and I will move for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 8D is a revocable right-of-way use permit with Downtown Oklahoma City Partnership to hold the Oklahoma City Tree Lighting Festival on November 17th. Mickey Mantle between Flaming Lips and Wanda Jackson. And we have Holly Hoyler here to speak on it. Holly?
Good morning. We are excited to bring back the Oklahoma City Tree Lighting Festival on Thursday, November 17th from 5 to 7 p.m. in Bricktown outside of the ballpark on Mickey Mantle Drive. The event is free and open to everyone and includes different activities such as photos with Santa, a Letters to Santa station, caricatures, face painting, and of course the main event of the mayor leading the countdown to the lighting of the Christmas tree. And that is bookended by a diverse and talented lineup of performers that are celebrating the season and representing the many cultures and traditions we have in this city. This is going to be the first time that we're bringing the event back after 2 years of cancellation, so we're excited to gather and celebrate with everyone together again. It will also be filmed and be a part of our virtual holiday special that will debut the Friday after Thanksgiving, so for those who aren't able to make it or want to experience it again, they can watch that online and on television. This is the kickoff of the holiday season in downtown in December. So we really appreciate the support of the mayor and the city to produce this event, and happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, thank you. Councilwoman Nice?
Well, I think we're all looking forward to the tree lighting, because this clearly shows that we have arrived to the Christmas holiday. So I've been able to attend once, and I know it was well attended, so very excited that you all are back in person, and I'll move for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Thank you, Holly. Okay, 8E is a revocable right-of-way use permit with Red Earth Inc. to hold the Red Earth Parade in Fall Fest this coming Saturday on Walker. And we have Christy Alcox?
Alcox.
Alcox, very good.
Mayor Holt, members of the council, thank you for letting me speak on behalf of Red Earth. We're here to ask for permission to close the streets to hold the 36th annual Red Earth Parade. It will start at 6 Northwest 6th and Walker, and come straight down Walker to the Myriad Gardens, which is the site for the second annual Red Earth Fall Fest. Fall Fest is an outdoor free family event that we put together when the larger event, the Red Earth Festival that's held every June, when we were not able to continue to have our powwow at the Cox Center, and we moved the festival to the National Cowboy Hall of Fame, we decided to take the dance portion of that event and actually build two events. So we now have an October event that's geared to help teach our children, our Native students in Central Oklahoma, some of the traditions that go along with their tribal communities. This event is co-hosted by the Oklahoma City Public Schools Native Services Division, and Dr. Yellowfish is very involved in helping get the word out to our students. We're also working with 8 other school districts in Central Oklahoma: Putnam City, Moore, Midwest City, Dale City, Norman, Yukon, Western Heights. All the schools are helping us to feed information to our urban students so they can come to this event. If they're not already involved in their tribal culture, this will give them a little bit of an experience to learn a little bit about those traditions. The event at Myriad Gardens will open at 10 o'clock on Saturday with a gourd dance it'll open at 10, but the gourd dance will start at noon, and that primarily is a dance that is done by some of our Plains tribes that honors the men of wisdom and the warriors from those societies. This will be a way for some of our male students to actually learn from their older counterparts. And then the actual dance won't start until 2 o'clock. We'll have a grand entry, and we'll have a dance until about 5 o'clock that afternoon. So it's a teaching opportunity for us to bring the students together. And we're very fortunate because we have funding from some wonderful organizations like Allied Arts that was just here for the meeting this morning, the NORC Fund, that's part of the Oklahoma City Community Foundation, the Kirkpatrick Family Fund, and the National Endowment for the Arts. We have funding, so everything that we're doing is free for our families. So we invite all of you to come join us. Bring your lawn chair, bring a picnic, enjoy a beautiful Saturday morning and afternoon. It's supposed to be good weather. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you. Councilwoman Hammond?
No questions, but very glad to see this offering and every year. And I know it is a really great spot in downtown every year to go and, like you said, celebrate those cultures and that educational opportunity between generations. So I'll move for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, we'll recess council and convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority, where we have items A through O we could take with one motion. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Now we'll adjourn OCMFA and convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority, and there is a presentation here for item B.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. David Todd is here with us, our MAPS Director, MAPS Program Director. This item will appear also on the consent docket. It's the binding term sheet for the management of the MAPS 4 youth centers, but I'll let David just introduce the item, and then Tina Belsick's here from Boys and Girls Club.
Thank you, David Todd, MAPS Program Manager. One of the more rewarding things is for me personally, is to be able to build buildings that people can do wonderful things in, and I think this is certainly one of those times. Now, this selection went through our usual process. You've seen the binding term sheets before with the other facilities we've done, but today we're here with Boys and Girls Club for the youth centers, and I'd like to introduce Tina Belsick, and she's going to give you a brief overview of what they plan to do at the youth centers.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I'll try and be brief but thorough. When we started thinking about youth centers many years ago, before it was even a thought for a MAPS consideration, we had a lot of ideas that fit our mission and our strategic plan. And fortunately, when MAPS 4, the resolution came out, what the intent of the council was and what we have heard from the city is very much in line with our mission and what we have been doing for 27 years in Oklahoma County. In the resolution itself, I think it's really important that we always try and go back and refer to that to make sure, as we are thinking about how we can make these successful for all of our kids in the city, making sure we're being consistent with the thoughts and the intentions that you all had when you created it and when the citizens of Oklahoma City approved these. And at the very beginning, the first sentence says, "For the purpose of transforming the lives of our young people." I think that is so key, and I think that that just means to me that we need to make sure that every young person, no matter what zip code they're born into, no matter what circumstances they're in, has the opportunity to succeed and lead a full life, become the person they were meant to be, pursue their passions, and have all the opportunities we would hope every young person should have. Our mission statement, as I mentioned, I feel like perfectly aligns with that. Our mission is to inspire and enable all young people, but especially those who need us most, to reach their full potential as productive, responsible, and caring citizens. We do that in a number of different ways through a lot of different evidence-based programs and a whole lot of fun. We have a lot of play with purpose for our young kids and a lot of programs intentionally designed for our preteens and teens that they know they're having an awesome time. We're collecting data from it and expecting outcomes from it. And we would envision being able to do something very similar to produce similar kinds of outcomes with these amazing youth centers. We have what we call our formula for impact, which it's fairly complicated, but the three things that we have as our priority outcomes from what we do at all of the youth centers we have across the city. There's three of them. One is academic success, and that is graduating from high school, but not just graduating with a plan for the future. So we begin working with our kids in middle school, even as young as 6th and 7th grade, introducing industries, job opportunities, different areas that they could go into in a variety of ways, making sure that by the time they graduate, whether they're going to college, going into military service, going into career tech, whatever that plan might be, they know as soon as they graduate. We are also very proud of the fact we have had a 100% graduation rate from high school for the past 11 years. One other thing I would mention in this, that we do the academic success for all levels. All of our kids have an hour of what we call Power Hour after school. This summer, because many of our kids across the city were so behind coming out of COVID, and that's not unique here, it's all over the country, it's all over the world. We had a very intentional focus on a reading recovery program in the midst of all of our amazing field trips and sports and everything else. And in that 1 month, we were able to improve the average grade level reading by 3.2 months in that 4 weeks. Our second priority outcome is strong character and leadership, or strong character and citizenship. In that, it's much what you would think. We have leadership programs that we run from elementary all the way through high school at an age-appropriate level, and kids get to participate in different ways. We also ask all of our kids at some point during the year to do some level of community service. We think that it's really important that our kids feel attached to their community. And those of you that are familiar with the OPNA data, the Oklahoma Prevention Needs Assessment, the mental health surveys that go out every 2 years, one of the biggest concerns that comes back from that is kids don't feel connected to their community, whether that community is their school or their neighborhood or Oklahoma City itself. And so one of the things we think that is really important is that our kids understand they are part of a bigger community, and it takes all of us to have a really wonderful community. So some people may give of their time or their talents or their treasures, but we can all do something. And so our little guys will put on safety vests and gloves and pick up some trash in the park, and our older kids might volunteer at the Regional Food Bank or the Homeless Alliance, but we're all learning how to give back. Our third priority outcome is healthy lifestyles. That's much what you would expect from a physical standpoint. It's about good nutrition and being active and getting good exercise, and our 5,000 kids we work with in sports programs fall under that category. But it's also about mental health, and that's become such a critical component. It's always been important, but in the past few years, that has escalated to an unbelievable new level. We have all kinds of programs on mindfulness, on resiliency, on coping skills, and specifically for kids that have high ACEs scores, we do have some additional programs that we run working with those kids to help overcome some of the childhood trauma that they may have had. Just a little glimpse of the youth centers that we currently run, our Boys and Girls Clubs. This is of all the 18 clubs kind of together collectively, what we have, and that's about 20% of our kids are in DHS custody. 95% of our kids currently come from a low-income family. About a third of our kids have an incarcerated family member. Over half of our kids don't have Wi-Fi in their home, and I would say of the other half, a significant portion don't have significantly strong Wi-Fi, where if they have 2 or 3 or 4 kids in the home, it's not sufficient for all of them to be on it at the same time. And then about 15% of our kids have recently been homeless. So we have kids that come from all background. We have kids from all socioeconomic backgrounds, all have been impacted, all need great youth centers, all need a wonderful, safe place to go. But typically, because we don't charge a fee, or in some cases we charge $5 for the school year, we tend to serve kids that don't have a lot of other options, and we're really proud of it because they are just amazing, wonderful, wonderful kids that just deserve an opportunity to have some of these supports that some other kids might have a little bit more easily. Again, I just kind of referred to this, but our vision as we responded to the RFP, and again, keeping in mind both our mission and the objectives that we have heard from City Council for a long time about your expectations for these youth centers. We think that for these to be successful, particularly if we're talking about transforming lives for some of our kids, that these have to be affordable and they have to be accessible. And so I think that those are critical components to the success here. We don't have time today to go into a ton of detail unless you guys have questions. And honestly, as Mr. Todd continues to remind me, this is a process, and we're just beginning this process, and there are many other people that will be weighing into it. So as part of our RFP response, we gave a very one-sided view of what we think might be helpful and might work, and we have seen be successful. But obviously, there will be many opportunities for you all to weigh in, for the Neighborhood Subcommittee and the Maps for Citizens Advisory Board, as well as we will be, when we get to that point, hosting some opportunities for young people and for parents and schools to weigh in as well. But we do believe that making sure that these are located in areas that are accessible, and that may mean working a little bit with some transportation changes, but that have the greatest population of the areas that we think have the greatest need for these youth centers. One of the things that we do that's maybe a little bit unique, we take a whole child approach in what we do with our kids. So when we find out that kids are homeless, or they are struggling with certain things in their family situation, or there's something going on at school and they're not comfortable telling someone, we make sure that we are addressing all of those needs of the child, whether it's hunger, all of those things that I just mentioned, because if a child is hungry, if kids aren't eating, if they don't have a place that's safe to lay their head at night, it's very hard for us to help them be successful for a lot of other things. So we've got to solve many of the other underlying issues, and we work with a wide variety of community partners to help ensure that we do that. I'm kind of skipping over some things, but I think you get the idea. Again, one of the things that I mentioned, if you walked into one of our youth centers today, and if you haven't been in one, I would really encourage you. I would love to extend an opportunity for you all to come visit. We have a 41,000 square foot youth center sitting in an amazing park at Memorial Park that is a good example of a starting point of what we might be looking at. But if you went in, you would see a lot of activity, a lot of fun, very engaged kids, and a wide variety of activities happening at all age levels. What you won't see is that we are running evidence-based programs and collecting a lot of outcomes. Outcomes, things like our kids are 73% less likely than their peers to use drugs and alcohol. In the healthy lifestyles, I kind of skimmed over it, but we run a lot of drug and alcohol prevention programs. We run gang prevention programs, anti-bullying programs, things like that that really help the kids have that stronger sense of citizenship and character. When you come in, as I mentioned, all of our youth are in a safe place and all are accepted for whoever they are. That's not something that all of our youth can say for every place that they go, and we think that's really important that they have that safe place. You'll see supportive relationships and mentorships. Some of our staff are new, but many have been there for 5, 10, 15, even over 20 years. And we sometimes have kids from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. Some we have for a moment, and we hope to make a positive impact no matter how long we have those kids. There's a long list of our program's activities. You can read for yourself there, but everything from arts, STEM, sports, a wide variety of sports, workforce development, college and career placement, all of the things that you would hope. Many of those are staff-run, but many of those are done in collaboration with the Arts Council, Oklahoma City Ballet, PAL, others that we work with around the city. I think it's important also to know that let me move this forward. This is just a very, very, very quick sampling. We'd have pages if we listed all of our community partners, but that's part of our standard operating procedure, and it's very much something I think we need in these youth centers to be successful, is having many areas of our city involved in what we are doing, but in a coordinated whole child fashion, not just a cafeteria plan of options, but a cafeteria plan within an overall arching objective. Otherwise, we aren't going to get the outcomes that we need, and we've seen this be successful. I want to point out one in particular with Sunbeam Family Services, going back to that mental health component. I know that Councilman Cooper is not here today, but I would be remiss if I did not mention that because it's become such an integral part, and he's asked me multiple times about how we're doing with that, and Sunbeam Family Services has been an amazing partner helping us with that mental health aspect. I think the most compelling statistic that I want to share with you today, we are very fortunate to be part of a national organization that's been around for 165 years, and all we do is after school and out of school time programs and summers and after school and running these with youth. We are fortunate because Boys and Girls Clubs of America paid the University of Michigan to do a study of alumni across the entire country. And they asked a lot of different questions, and 90% said they had a great time, and 95% said they're still in touch with friends from the Boys and Girls Club, all the things you would hope to see. But the one that leaps off the page to me is that 54% of kids who came through a Boys and Girls Club said it saved their life. It kept them out of drugs, kept them out of juvenile detention, kept them in school, and it was the difference in their life. And I'm hoping that that's compelling to you too, because that's what I would expect to see as an outcome from these youth centers. So wrapping up, I feel honored to have the opportunity to even be here talking to you all. I would like to say in all humbleness, I feel like we are just uniquely positioned to be successful being the operator for these youth centers because our vision and our mission is so perfectly aligned with everything I know about what the City Council is expecting and what our community is expecting from these youth centers. It it gives us an opportunity we've never had with facilities before to be able to run some of these amazing programs. I want to thank the council so much for recognizing the need for these in our community and for recommending that we appropriate $110 million, or maybe that's going up, I hope, for these youth centers because they're so desperately needed for the kids in our community, and I truly, truly believe they will make a significant difference. If you all approve this, I just would like to say thank you for entrusting Boys and Girls Club with the honor and the privilege of being the operator for these and working with community partners to ensure great futures for all of our kids. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Really great presentation. I look forward to the partnership and working with you. The one thing I would say, and I hope this, and I know we're at a very early stage in this process, but prior to MAPS 4 being on the drawing board, there was a lot of hard work done by Tim McLaughlin, excuse me, Peter DeLisi and Chief Bill City, and that was presented when MAPS 4 was being considered. And so as far as Tim and Peter and Chief City's work are considered, I think that it should be considered, utilized, and looked at as we go forward.
It absolutely is. I mean, I talk to Tim multiple times a week, and he and I have conversations about this all the time. I know they did a lot of work. I have been working with the Arts Council. We're trying to actually get them in as many of our 18 clubs as possible. They already work in some of our clubs now. We partner with them, and they will be an important partner in these going forward. And Bill City has been on our board. So I totally agree. They put a lot of work into that. We had some input in that as well, and I think that's a meaningful component of all the things that we'll be looking at.
I love the statistic, 54% saved. Great presentation today. Look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tina,
Yes.
without a doubt, your proposal is the best of any partner that we've previously or will in the future work with. Your results speak for themselves, and it's helpful that you have the evidence to support your goals and your efforts, but you know, many of those wouldn't even be necessary when you speak with those children who've gone through your program and their parents who can firsthand tell about the great experience they've achieved by working with the Boys and Girls Club. My concern is that there's only enough money for 4 locations. Let me ask you this. So I'm familiar with the program, and I'm not sure if you continue to have it today at Cesar Chavez School. The in-school program has some advantages over a remote site in terms of the students at that school. It's very easy for them to stay there. What's the time frame that you work with these children? For example, in a school setting, is it just for an hour or 2 a day compared to these facilities like the one up on Northwest 36th Street? Do you have them for a longer period of time?
We do. We are in 12 schools, and the rest of them are facilities like our Memorial Park facility or the new one in Northeast Oklahoma City that we have the grand opening next week. In the schools, we typically are there for 3 hours after school closes. So if school is out for elementary in Oklahoma City Public Schools, they're out at 3:15. We're actually there till 6:30 in those schools.
Okay.
Many of our parents don't get off work until 6 o'clock, and so we need to make sure that those kids stay safe and are fed and are engaged until the parents can come and get them. So we have a minimum of 3 hours that we work at any of our school sites. Our other locations are open a little bit longer, and we would envision going forward, and again, so much of this will be developed over the next 3 years as we figure out where all of these, I'm looking at David, because I don't want to speak about where these might be because it's so premature, and I don't want to be presumptuous because I know there are a lot of people with a lot of great ideas. I agree with you. I don't think 4 are enough. I think there will be some need for certain elementaries to still have something in their schools, and I think it could be a combination. What we want to do first and foremost is support these youth centers, and we're gonna have a learning curve, all of us together a little bit on this. But I can use Memorial Park as an example. And with Memorial Park, we are not in the schools that feed into Memorial Park, but we provide transportation for all of those kids, and are even, in some cases, like we are in the old Telstar Elementary, way out east. We even provide some transportation back to the school at the end of the evening for parents that need to walk and pick up the kids. And I think that might be a necessary component here. We just don't know yet because we don't know where they will be.
Right.
One of the things I can tell you that our board is working on very hard, because we don't think 4 is enough, is trying to do a couple more of these through funding that we are raising in areas that we don't see city property available, but we know there is a significant need. So we've already begun that. I mentioned our Northeast facility, and I'm going to look at Councilwoman Nice because it's in her ward, and it's at 38th and Prospect, and we have just put over $2 million into that, external and internal facilities. Tim McLaughlin was a big part of that. We have the grand opening next week. We have funding requests to complete the construction and add a gym to that and add additional facilities. And we are working with the neighborhood church because they were trying to raise money for a gym, and we can all share that, and it would be part of a community. So if we're able to do that, that covers one area that otherwise we might be using some MAPS dollars to go into that area. I don't want to get too much into that, but we also, in the heart of Capitol Hill, there's very little land, and I had months and months ago, talked with Melinda McMillan Miller about when you look at the data, there's a hot spot there. We have 6 clubs in that area, most of them in schools.
Right.
We have bought a property, and we have asked for funding. We're waiting to hear if we get it. That would be about a $5 million renovation there that would put one in the heart of Capitol Hill. And if we did Capitol Hill and Northeast and Memorial Park, then that gives us 3 youth centers that we would own, but would look very similar, I believe, to what the city would be putting in, which gives us a lot more flexibility with the city. We're looking at this as a long-term partnership covering all of Oklahoma City, and that would give us a little bit more flexibility with the MAPS $4, which is what we were trying to do.
Well, yeah. So the only thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is if these facilities might reduce the number of in-school programs, and I know you're limited due to resource limitations, to be able to have a location at every school. I know that's expensive, but that would concern me just because of the success you've had at Cesar Chavez School.
And thank you for recognizing that success. We work very hard to do that in all of our schools. I think that's something that we'll need to have a dialogue with as we go through and look at that. Being in schools can be a wonderful, wonderful solution, but it's not a perfect solution. We are at Adelaide Lee, which is just right down the street from Capitol Hill. And because of the overcrowding there, we have 1 portable, and the fire marshal will only allow us to have 50 children in there, and I have a waiting list of 127 kids.
Sure.
So I know that that's one tiny data point, but I could give you many, many more.
Right.
Some of the schools that we are in, for whatever reason, we are very limited, and we're not allowed to use gyms, or we're not allowed to use facilities. At one place, they even told us all we could have was sitting on the floor of a hall.
Whoa.
That's not what we need for these kids. That's not serving those kids well. So it's hit and miss when an elementary school program can be successful in a school.
I'm sorry to hear that kind of response from the schools. One final comment, don't overlook an area like where Rotary Park is. There's a lot of youth in that area, and you could stretch all the way over to what used to be Jackson Junior High and draw a lot of young people who need this.
There are. You're absolutely right.
Thank you.
And please don't take that comment as any way negative. I can tell you we have the best relationship we've ever had with our school districts right now, and when I brought things like that to people's attention, they're working very hard to correct them. I don't want to leave that with a negative thought in anyone's head, but it is challenging. It is not as easy as it always seems, and Sometimes there are 4 or 5 or 6 after-school programs all wanting to use the same facilities at the same time, which is a little bit restrictive. So I think it has to be a combination, and in certain areas, that may be the best solution if there's not a youth center that's near. In other places, there may be a better opportunity for those kids at a youth center.
I like the comment that Mark mentioned in terms of 54% said the program saved their life, but just as important is that you've got a 100% graduation rate. That's unheard of, especially in the Oklahoma City public school system.
There were a few we weren't quite sure were going to make it, but they did, and we're very proud of that. We work really hard with our tutoring and our academic supports. And again, we motivate our kids and give them something to strive for and to look for beyond graduation, and that is a powerful motivator.
Sure, thank you.
Well, I'll just say this. I know as we talk through the Northeast location that I am happy to hear that there has been a relationship or a better relationship established with the church, because I know there has been some conversations to me that there has been not been enough communication as far as that relationship has been and to establish that. So happy to hear that, and I'll continue to keep my ear to what their concerns have been and how you all can be better neighbors to that church that's next door. And I know these are all new things, so they're going to be complicated and difficult. So I don't deny that, but I just want to say again that I'm happy to hear of that better relationship to be established, and to see what ways we can work better with those neighbors that you were actually talking about.
And just so you know, that Eastside Church of Christ that's right next to us, they have a goal of building a new church in the near future. And in order to do that, because of the way it sits on their property, they actually need part of the property that we own, and we have already committed to them that we will work with them to either do a land swap or give them that land or something so that they would be able to accomplish that. And also to give them access to the outdoor facilities that we have just built as soon as we get past this grand opening.
Any other
Thank you,
comments?
Tina.
Thank you.
So much, Tina. Does that conclude the presentation? All right. Well, we are still on the PPA docket, and we could adopt items A through C with one motion. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, we'll adjourn OCPPA and reconvene as the council. We're now at item 9, the consent docket. And there's a scheduled presentation at item BL, and that is it. Is there any other item that a council member wishes to pull out for separate vote or separate discussion?
Yes, I have a few, just discussion about AR,
Okay.
AU, and BH.
What was the last one?
BH, B as in boy.
H as in Henry? Okay, got it. Okay.
Yes, I would like to pull out item Q.
Okay. All right. If that's it, we'll start there then. Councilwoman Nice, item Q. Yes, I would just like for us to defer this for 2 weeks. I would like to have some more conversations about that before we introduce it. And that's really all I wanted to do. Okay. Well, then I guess we can bring that up for a motion. Motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, that item is deferred. Item AR, Councilwoman Hammond.
Yes, I just wanted to hear from Public Works. I know this stretch of street over on Main I've received a handful of questions about when will it get restriped and all that. So I just kind of wanted to get an update on that, given that it seems like we were kind of waiting on that final acceptance based on some of the plans for how we will stripe. So I just wanted to see if you could kind of fill some of that information in and give us maybe if there is a proposed timeline for when the striping will start.
Sure, I can answer your questions. Debbie Miller, Assistant Director for Public Works. This project, this item here actually final accepts the pavement that we resurfaced. We did have to go through Traffic Commission and notification of all the property owners to make some adjustments to be able to get the Tier 1 bike lanes through there. And we do have that work order issued to the contractor, and they should be out there and hope to have it completed by the end of this year.
Wonderful. I know a lot of people will be very excited. It's one of the main questions I've gotten for about a year, and I'm like, I know it's coming. There's just a lot of moving parts. So I appreciate y'all's persistence and just the whole project.
Okay. Then item AU.
I believe we'll keep you up for this one as well. I just kind of, I know we've had some, Councilman Cooper and myself has had some conversations with Public Works and Planning about this stretch of, I know he has Youngs and then we share where Villa is going to be addressed through this project. But just, yeah, kind of, this is another one that I've gotten a lot of questions about along Villa. And so I just kind of wanted to get a little bit more information. It sounds like we're going to do a traffic study to see if we maybe need to put in another, some more traffic control essentially along Villa. Is that correct?
It is. This is an amendment to the engineering contract. It's to look at a traffic study for an all-way stop control at Northwest 19th and Villa. So they'll do the study and then make the recommendation to the Traffic Commission.
Is there a timeline of if when we approve this, what the traffic study, like when we would get the results of it?
It should be included in the preliminary report that we expect to have later this year.
So just later this year,
Yeah,
great.
and so it will be included in that, and then once it's approved, we'll go ahead and send that to Traffic Commission and get them.
Okay, and from, it looks like, because I know one of the conversations that Councilman Cooper and I were having is kind of the frustration that it's just going to be Sharrows, at least south of 23rd on Villa, is kind of all we have room for without moving any concrete. So my understanding is this will also maybe give us some recommendations on some other traffic calming measures we might be able to induce in that area as well.
Yes, that will be included in the
That'll be
preliminary
part of it. Perfect. Thank you so much. That's very exciting.
Okay, so item BH, Councilwoman Hammond.
Yes, so this item, I just kind of caught my eye because it seemed so out of the ordinary, and I was just kind of curious if we could hear a little bit more from staff about kind of what happened here and what kind of the plan going forward is, obviously as much as we're able to share since there is some legal issues at hand.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. Chris Browning, Utilities Director. There's a company who has an oil lease at Wiley Post, and they asked for a permit to extend a temporary water main across the Hefner Canal through Stinchcombe Wildlife Refuge and into the North Canadian River. We denied the permit, asked them to take a different route, and they did it anyway, and affected damage within the wildlife refuge and took water out of the North Canadian River without an ODEQ permit, which that water belongs to us. And so we're hiring outside counsel to take legal action accordingly.
Thank you. Yeah, when I first read the item, just sort of broad description, I was like, excuse me, what are we doing? Because to me, it sounded like we were going to be maybe working with this company to extend some exploration into the wildlife refuge. No, but glad to very much hear that we're really intent on protecting those resources, and just kind of want to, I think it's an interesting case that, like I said, is kind of unique and doesn't seem to pop up a lot for us. So really appreciate you all, your interest in protecting those natural resources. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Hey, Chris, real quick, sorry, on this. It also talks about the damages that were done and that they delivered wastewater. In oil exploration, that can be a really high content of salty water. Do we know how much that they deposited into Sitchcombe or into the Canadian?
It's my understanding that, they hauled all that away. We don't know of any evidence that suggests that they discharged water into Stinchcombe.
Okay.
It was the taking of the water out of the river and the path of the pipeline that caused the damage to the water trust.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the scheduled presentation at item BL.
Thank you, Mayor. So Ian Hutchinson in our budget office is going to introduce this item. This is our capital improvements plan. We do a 5-year capital improvements plan every other year. And so what we'll have is we're going to do an introduction on this item. Ian will give us an overview. We'll see a presentation on MAPS program and on Public Works. Next council meeting, we will have on city manager reports because there won't be an item to make a decision on yet. We'll have just another presentation from a couple more departments just to give you an overview of the capital improvement plan, and then we'll bring it back. Ian will probably talk about it. I think it's in November. We'll bring it back for adoption.
Morning, Mayor and City Council. Ian Hutchison with the Office of Management and Budget, here to present the proposed 5-year capital improvement plan, or the CIP. And so just a bit about what the CIP is. It's essentially a management tool for organizing long-term infrastructure projects that the city undertakes. And those projects are identified through a variety of sources. A lot of it is sort of internal plans and studies that departments are conducting, but there's also voter-approved projects through the GeoBond program, and a lot of them address city council priorities as well. The plan is updated biennially or every 2 years, and it does include trust-related capital projects. So that would be projects of the Water Utilities Trust, the Zoological Trust, Airports Trust. And those individual bodies do receive and review their portions of the capital plan too. So in terms of what's in this version of the CIP, so there are $3.6 billion worth of projects over that 5-year period in the plan. The Planning Commission, every time receives and reviews the CIP for conformance with the city's comprehensive plan, Plan OKC. And the Planning Department did find it to be in conformance, and thus the Planning Commission recommended it to City Council for approval. And so today is the introduction of the CIP, the setting of the public hearing and adoption on November 8th, and then in between now and then on October 25th, the Parks and Recreation and Utilities Departments will present their portions of the plan as well. All right, so a bit of what is making up the funding sources in the CIP. So as you can see here, the majority of it is funded through trust funds. So that would be the Water Utilities Trust, the Airports Trust. So that makes up quite a bit of the funding in here. Sales tax funds make up around a quarter. That would include the MAPS 4 sales tax. And then the GeoBond program makes up a significant portion as well. And a lot of that is the 2017 authorization at this point. And here is a look at the projects by project type. So you can see that utilities is by far the largest project type. That sort of goes along with trust funds being the biggest funding source. The community enhancements category, that second one at around $500 million, that's the MAPS 3 and the MAPS 4 programs, so that's what makes up most of that. And then there's just a variety of other project types, but Public Works includes the streets project type, drainage, traffic, bridges, so Public Works sort of has a lot of these included in their budget. And lastly, I'll just go into a bit of what's in the plan for a few departments that are significant but won't present individually this time around. So the Airports Department has a lot in the plan, $191 million. Two of their biggest projects are the passenger bridge upgrade at Will Rogers World Airport and a runway rehab. And then Public Transportation and Parking has about $65 million worth of projects. Two of their biggest ones are bus rapid transit and the bus replacement. And then finally, a look at fire and police. They have a lot in here as well. A lot of that is sort of the routine replacement of vehicles and apparatus, so that's always a big cost. But the CIP does include the sort of joint project of the Fire Police Training Center, and that's a 2017 GeoBond program project. And so that's all that I had, and I'm happy to take any questions on the CIP sort of as a whole, but then after me you'll hear from the MAPS office first and then the Public Works Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Good morning. David Todd, MAPS Program Manager. I want to start off by introducing an integral part of our office. Leo Sia is here. He's our business manager. And, you know, you hear about the construction part a lot, but they don't get much credit for all the financial piece of that. So Leo leads that part of the office, and he is also integral in putting together this presentation today. One of the things that kind of gets lost in all the excitement of MAPS 4 is that we're still working on MAPS 3. So in the next 5 years, we'll still have $26 million of MAPS 3 projects, along with $673 million of MAPS 4 for a total of $699 million. And in MAPS 3, because we had excess collections and we had significant interest, we were able to put that money towards renovating the historic Union Station. You'll be seeing a design contract for that within a couple of weeks. The preliminary report has already been completed, so we're pretty far along on that and hope to get that started real soon. And then also some of the other projects. We've got trails projects, we've got some sidewalks projects that also benefited from excess collections and interest. And then the tail end of the senior wellness centers will be in that. And then there's a little bit of the budget out of the Fairgrounds Coliseum that's paid mostly out of MAPS 4, but there's a little bit, as I said, still coming out of MAPS 3 for the fairgrounds. Excuse me, starting with MAPS 4, under community, we will complete the diversion hub, $17 million there. Homelessness is broken into multiple sections, but $22 million of that will be completed. Family Justice Center at Palomar will be completed, $36 million on that. And then mental health and addiction, $39 million on that. Neighborhoods, the parks is more complicated because it's got all the different breakouts, but throughout the 5 years, we will have completed $98 million of projects. You just heard about youth centers. Today, we should have 2 of the 4 completed for a total of $72 million. The animal shelter, $42 million. And then a 5th senior wellness center with $16 million investment in that. Clara Looper Civil Rights Center, we're real close to sending out the notice to start architecture on that project, but $17 million goes towards that project, and that will be complete. The connectivity has got a lot of moving parts, but transit at $69 million, which includes the bus stops, some park and ride, and both of the second and third, both of the BRTs that are in MAPS 4 will be at some stage. One of them will be in construction, one of them will still be in design. Beautification, another one that'll have a lot of phases, but 3 of the 5 phases should be complete at that time for $17 million. And continuing in that vein, sidewalks, bike lanes, trails, street lights, all in pieces, but $65 million of those projects will be completed. We've just received our first letters of interest for sidewalks, so we're getting ready to start sidewalks again on MAPS 4, while we still have sidewalks under construction in MAPS 3 right now. Innovation District, that includes the connectivity piece of the Innovation District and the H.B. Foster Center. Both of those will be complete. We've just completed interviews for H.B. Foster, so architecture will be starting on that real soon. Also, the I-235 bridge will be in that mix. Maps for venues, the Fairgrounds Coliseum bids tomorrow. Pretty excited about getting that bid tomorrow. And then the multipurpose stadium will be designed and built. And then the basketball practice facility at $11 million will be some renovations over there. Remember that because of the arena plan and the additional projections that we have, that money's still sitting out there. I went through that pretty quick, but our projects are pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to try and answer them.
One quick question about the maps for sidewalks. You said you're sort of getting started on them. Can you kind of let us know, because I know in the resolution we had expressed intent of spending that money in the pedestrian priority areas as part of Bike Walk OKC, but I know that's sort of been undergoing some updates and revisions. So I'm just kind of curious how that process has overlapped with starting to target where to start spending that money.
Right. We've talked with planning about that and understand that that's kind of in flux right now. But once we get that consultant on board, we'll meet with them, figure out what it is, where we need to attack that to do more sidewalks. As you know, we need them everywhere.
Yes,
but yeah, we certainly need to identify those priority areas.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
So next up, we'll have Eric with the projects from Public Works.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Eric Winger, Public Works Director. Similarly with Public Works, obviously being a large department, we've had a lot of help in getting our presentation together. I've got with me today Billy Little, who's our business manager for Public Works, and also Mike Miller, who's one of our senior financial managers. There's a lot that goes into making these presentations. There's a lot of different funding sources and projects to keep track of, so without them, it'd be very difficult to present this today. We're looking again at the 5-year capital improvement plan for Public Works. You'll see that it's a total of $495 million. This is really that 5-year summary that you see, and you'll notice the first 2 years are a little stronger than the next 3, and that's really just a simple matter of the Better Streets, Safer City program. Those first 2 years include the sales tax, which is now winding down, with the remaining 3 years being predominantly our bond-funded projects. So this was naturally going to happen. It's not a surprise. We're also looking at, as a part of the projects, what you're going to see is that Public Works builds for a lot of the other different departments, including Parks, Embark, Airport, Zoo, and the Fairgrounds. And so just keep that in mind going forward. A lot of roads, bridge, and drainage, but also facility projects as well. These are different project types that are included. We've got everything from street widening and resurfacing, drainage and bridge, intersection traffic control, sidewalks, street enhancements, and then also the facility projects. We look at the work by project type, you're going to see the vast majority of the work that's included in the CIP is streets related at $384 million. This is, as a reminder, when we actually did the Better Streets program, and this isn't just the CIP, but the totals, we nearly had $500 million in bond towards streets, and we had about $170 million in sales tax towards streets for a grand total of about $670 million. This next 5 years, 384 of that's going to be included with streets. We look by funding source. The bond is our largest source. So at $392 million, you'll see that the sales tax is a smaller portion, but significant, but you'll see stormwater, grant, and impact fees. So as we look at the next series of slides, these are going to be more or less examples of what you can expect. We have 13 projects in our street widening program valued at over $60.4 million. This is a map of those locations throughout the city, of the work that can be expected on the widening side for the next 5 years. You'll see a concentration in Ward 3 with several widenings. It just happens to be our fastest growing area of Oklahoma City. So this was just as a result of the Turnpike expansion in Southwest. So there are other widenings planned, and so these are the ones that you can expect to see very soon. This is an example of one of our widening projects on MacArthur from 150th to 164th. As a cost of just under $4 million. But this is what the traditional widenings will look like. Most of them are 2-lane to 4-lane upgrades. Some include sidewalks, some do not. But we are seeing increases in traffic throughout the city, so more widening projects on the way. When we look at street resurfacing projects, these actually come in several categories. We've got both arterial and residential. Just as a reminder, we've got over 3,500 centerline miles of roadway in Oklahoma City, so it's vast and it's extensive. Everything that you see in yellow that's identified on this map are, again, those arterial resurfacings. Everything that you see in the blue hatched boxes are the residential resurfacing projects. When we look at the grand totals, we have 127 arterial projects that are shown here at a value of almost $130 million. We have 19 residentials that also exceed $100 million in work that is upcoming. It's an example of some of our residential resurfacing. This is on Ann Arbor. Typically, as we go into the neighborhoods, it can be somewhat complicated. We're having to make ADA upgrades as a part of some of these resurfacing projects and also work very closely with the residents. It's not uncommon that there's a lot of vehicles that are parked on streets and things that the contractors have to work through. This is an example of arterial resurfacing project. This is Air Depot. Just general examples, it costs $350,000 to $400,000 per lane mile for a street resurfacing. So as we look at projects that are like Air Depot that are 2 lanes, those can be estimated at about $800,000. When we look at a 4-lane resurfacing, they can be as much as $1.6 million per mile as we move forward. We have several intersection and traffic control projects. There's 14 of these that are valued at $16 million. You'll see those locations that are here. The identification with the orange circle, those are the ones that are actually our bond program projects. The ones that you see with the yellow triangle are our traffic impact projects throughout the city. There's been several questions about those. We simply are finishing the design on these projects and getting ready to push those forward, but you can expect to see each of these locations addressed in the next 5 years or less. This is typical of some of those intersection projects. This just happens to be Mustang Road at Southwest 44th. It was a $100,000 project where we actually did signal upgrades. You also see that they're updating the ADA striping with the continental crosswalks, the new stop bars, and intersection paint. Moving on to street enhancement projects, we have 17 projects valued at $32 million. These are the locations that are currently shown. These can include sidewalk, lighting, and district identification. When we do a street enhancement project, we're actually working with those specific stakeholders in each of those areas. So each of the projects is unique, just depending on what the needs are for each location. This happens to be the Paseo District. This one is one that we're currently working on, wrapping up the plans now and getting ready for a future bid and construction in early '23. Some other projects that we're working on are Automobile Alley, Stockyards. We're still doing some limited work in the Project 180 areas of downtown. Moving on to drainage projects, we have 15 projects valued at $37 million. This is one of those multi-fund options. This is where we have some bond funds, but we also have our drainage utility funds that provide for these locations that you see on this map. These are generally areas that we've identified of complaint of flooding. So a lot of these have not yet been engineered, but the solutions as we proceed forward can include anything from just new infrastructure to channel improvements. This is an example of one of our projects at 122nd, just east of MacArthur. This is the use of gabion baskets. We're finding more and more that the Army Corps of Engineers has a preference for more natural improvements and not just concrete liners for most of our channels. So this is just an example of one of those projects using the baskets. This is Twin Creek and Brock Creek that we've recently improved. This is one that we were needing to move a large volume of water in a short amount of time, so you will see it's a little more industrial with the slope wall concrete panels. This was a $4 million project that has been completed, but using it as an example of what to expect moving forward. We have a number of bridge projects, 10 of them valued at $14.7 million that are located here with the red circles. This is just an example. This is Wilshire between Frisco and Cemetery. This is that part you just don't normally see that's underneath that road when you cross one of the many creeks in Oklahoma City. There's actually a box structure that you'll see. You'll see the handrails and some of the other protections that are on there. But again, moving that water across and under that road as opposed to going over the road is always going to be a preference as we rebuild bridge structures and roadways throughout the area. So another example on Memorial Road, just a quarter mile west of Sarah, similar type structure. You'll see the use of riprap, which is the large rocks that you see there to help stabilize the embankments. But again, I just think it's important to show some of the work that happens with those road projects. It's not actually the road itself. And as we move on to specialty bridge projects, this is one that has some attention here in the last few weeks. This is our new pedestrian bridge that's actually crossing Northwest Expressway. We were able to get that bridge set and in place. It's actually connecting to trail systems. We're excited to actually be able to open this up just later this year. As you see, it is going to have an LED lighting package that's going to be able to make it very identifiable. So more to come on this as we get ready to move towards the final acceptance and the grand opening of the Expressway Bridge project. Moving on to sidewalks, and David Todd mentioned in MAPS, there's a number of sidewalks in the MAPS program. We actually have 12 projects valued at just under $10 million, mostly bond-funded sidewalks that you see here identified in yellow. Again, these locations are generally following Bike Walk OKC, so as new funds and different opportunities come available, we will be using that planning master plan moving forward. And this is some of the examples of some of those neighborhood sidewalks. I use these examples because sidewalks can be quite challenging. You'll see on the left side of this photo, it actually includes a very short retaining wall as we try to work with those property owners to make sure that we minimize those impacts to yards. So we work around irrigation systems as we go and implement those sidewalks through a lot of the community of Oklahoma City. We're also making those sidewalks ADA accessible. This is at Northwest 10th in Vermont. You'll see the inclusion of a lot of ADA ramps as a part of the sidewalk projects. And this just brings another level of complication, but it does provide accessibility to all. And then moving on to our last category, we talk about facility projects. There's a lot of infrastructure that Public Works provides, but as we get into facility projects, we have 3 that are valued at $15 million. These are the locations of a number of the projects that we also manage citywide. So I know there's more than 3 on here, but we do manage the police, the fire, and also several of the sports facilities for the Parks Department. We recently opened the Belle Isle Library, so this will be an example of a type of facility project that Public Works would facilitate, manage the construction. We've also got the Almonte Library that's currently in construction. It's scheduled to be completed in fall of 2023. And then we've also got the Willa D. Johnson Recreational Center under construction. It's also being targeted for completion here in the spring of 2023, so construction is going really well. And with that, that'll wrap up the Public Works CIP for the next 5 years, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Glad you asked. I have quite a few as I look at, especially going through as far as the streets, for street reconstruction, construction, repair, resurfacing. I'm curious to know how these streets were selected, the priorities for those particular streets, in addition to, I know as council members, we have expressed priorities as well, and I don't see any of the streets or even close to any of the streets that I have suggested on this list, which are a priority, because I hear from the residents more than often about far east of Ward 7, and one particular street that I even wrote on the other morning in far east of Northeast Oklahoma City that we continue to patch, and clearly it needs to be resurfaced. So just quite curious as to how these streets were selected, and how do we, as the council, how are we able to advocate for those streets that have been set a priority to either us traveling on some of those streets and hearing from the residents, or those residents who have reached out to us, and then we travel on those streets and advocate the same way?
Right, happy to answer. So the majority of the streets that you actually see in the current CIP are our bond-funded projects. So I mentioned that the sales tax program was winding down. For the large picture, in 2017, when the 2017 bond was proposed to the stakeholders, residents and the voters of Oklahoma City, we did present opportunities for inclusion of comments from them for streets if they had some ideas and suggestions. The majority of the projects, though, were selected based on prioritization. Simply put, those streets with the highest traffic and the lowest condition or the lowest PCI were the ones that were prioritized over those elsewhere. When it was determined the amount of money that would be able to be sold in the bond issue, which for the streets program under the bond was just under $500 million, we simply were only to get so far down that list based on that prioritization model. There's a recognition that there's a lot more streets that need to be done. It's just going to take a lot more money. So we've made a lot of progress. In addition to the 2017 bond, we were able to successfully also pass the 2017 sales tax. We used a similar prioritization methodology for it as well. So again, those streets with the highest traffic and the worst condition, we actually were able to wrap into also the fact that the streets that were getting the highest number of work orders and pothole repairs had a level of prioritization with that too. We've completed those. So what you're seeing is the remaining streets in the bond program that were prioritized back in 2017. We're keeping a running list of streets now that also are priority, they just are simply unfunded. If we are able to identify funding for some of those unfunded streets and receiving suggestions from stakeholders, from council members is really beneficial because there are opportunities from time to time that we can partner with the county. There are times that we can identify another funding source, perhaps something from a grant or something, other savings on the bond. We're going to be able to present to the council new streets that you've suggested or ones that we know that are a priority today. We just simply aren't able to fund them all.
Okay, thank you for that. And I just want to reemphasize, as I have continuously, in relation to a couple of one particular bridge project that we're having to fix immediately because the state shut that particular bridge down. And now we're working towards the effort of repairing, which is going to take 2 years for it to be completed, that we have residents who have to take alternate routes and use specific streets. So I understand a 2017 GEO bond and funding. However, that's 5 years ago. You know, as we look at today and where we move in relation to where priorities now sit in said areas, especially again, I'm very disappointed for a 5-year plan. There is nothing that's being done in far northeast Oklahoma City for our residents that live that way. It does not show that we value what their thoughts and concerns have been, in my opinion. And I can always be corrected in my thoughts in that, but it shows here completely that I'm right. And that's the unfortunate part of what we're looking at. And it's hard for me to relay that conversation to my residents who ask me every time I go towards the Spencer area when a couple of streets are going to be repaved or just more attention to those said areas in the community. So I know and understand and I get all of these things, 17 GEO bond, all of the projects, but I want to continue to keep at the forefront of those conversations. While these are 17, we still have had immediate emergencies, that require us sometimes to maneuver in a way to accommodate said residents in those certain areas that we have had to make them move in a different direction or find an alternate route in certain areas of our city. So I just want to again reemphasize that when we look at this CIP for the next 5 years, I have difficulty with looking at nothing being done in the far east part of northeast Oklahoma City, according to this particular plan.
You know, I would just comment that I think we're maximizing the potential of the funding that's available, whether it's the bond issue, whether it was the temporary sales tax, now that we're actually able to use some city ARPA funds for certain enhancements, and that's how we're able to fund the bridge project on Midwest Boulevard. Had we not had opportunities like the ARPA funds, it might have been the next bond issue before we maybe were able to fully fund a bridge that got into the condition that it did. But we're going to always be really vigilant to make sure that we address emergency projects as quickly as we can. I think we've been successful with that. But yes, it does take time to do bridge designs and bridge constructions a little bit more than just a street resurfacing, and that's the reason that particular project's just going to take a little longer than maybe expected.
Thank you, Eric. That's all we have on the CIP today.
Okay. Well, we also have a resident who signed up to speak on a couple items under the consent docket, Joy Reardon. Joy signed up to make a general statement, I think, about zoning cases and then that are under the consent docket, and then also specifically item 9AW. Resurfacing in Automobile Alley.
Yeah, back to this street stuff. For the last 10 years, the street, 9th Street, is, especially in front of where we live, Joy Reardon, 125 Northwest 9th, sorry. I've been asking for our street to be considered, and then this coming up, Automobile Alley to get resurfaced. It doesn't need to be resurfaced at all because of the streetcar project and several other projects. Has 360, the streetcar project, that whole strip that AW has already been resurfaced multiple times. From Oklahoma Boulevard or Avenue or Street, I can't think of what it is, all the way to Walker, they've gone in there, contractors has gone in there to do the HDD stuff, horizontal drilling, and down by Hudson, they raised the street almost a foot. I've got videos of going from Oklahoma all the way down, and then from Broadway to Robinson, the employees at the hospital are making our little block a drag strip. The stop signs at Robinson are non-existent to a lot of people. And we've got elderly and people like me that try to go across the street. I can count at least 7 times I've almost been run over. Because they don't want to go down 10th Street and everything. I understand that we need to resurface it, but it goes back to what Councilwoman Nice said. A lot of these projects have been resurfaced within the last 5 years. And there's other places like the street that I live on that contractors have literally come in and chopped up, putting in underground utilities and stuff like that.
30 seconds, please.
But I'll be back on some other issues. But the other one on the thing is, y'all know my normal thing about the building and stuff. On a lot of these bridge projects and stuff with these developers stuff, why not get them, because of all the heavy construction traffic and everything, instead of the city paying for it? Why not have that in their contract where if they're going to build all these developments and stuff, let's do a little bit of street improvement, and maybe the city won't have to carry the load. Thank you. I'll be back.
Thank you.
And if you don't mind, I did have one more thing that I wanted to mention as I was looking at this 5-year CIP plan, and I already know the answer to it, but I wanted to bring it up anyway. The public transportation and parking capital program and budget, as far as the FAM landing with the Oklahoma River at the FAM, I understand that is some of a maps for a project, but I do want to also mention that we have continuously asked in relation to this landing that there be a connection and some type of bus route that helps us to get to the First Americans Museum for visitors to be able to travel and to see if they do not have a way to use cars or bikes or however other means of transportation to get to these places. So I understand it could be under a couple of different categories, but I just wanted to reemphasize the need for us to prioritize this particular area, since we're investing a lot of dollars into this visitation place and this destination that it is working itself to become.
Okay. Well, that concludes the consent docket. We can now take a motion to adopt it. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, item 10 is the concurrence docket. We have items A through R we could take with one motion. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, item L are items requiring separate votes, and we'll start with item 11A, ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at Northwest 44th Street, going from SPU Day 49 to R1. And has someone communicated with Councilman Cooper? Okay.
Yes, I have been voluntold for his duties, so I will understand all of his. He has asked to move forward, so I will ask for approval for item A.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11B is an ordinance on final hearing. It was recommended for approval at 14600 South Portland, going from AA and AE2 to PUD 1906 and AE2. Councilman Greenwell.
Thank you. This was approved unanimously by the Planning Commission. There are no protests. I move for approval.
A motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11C, 1 and 2. C1 is amending the master design statement for item C2, which is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 200 Southwest 134th Street, going from SPUD 1335 to SPUD 1387. Councilman Greenwell.
Thank you. Mark, would you mind coming up here? This zoning application has been ongoing for basically 6 months, and I appreciate your efforts, Tim's efforts, the residents' efforts, and the owners' efforts in getting a compromise. And could you let us know just a little bit about the compromise at this point in time, and that at this point there's no continuing protests that you're aware of?
Absolutely. Mark Zitzau with Johnson & Associates. Address is 1 East Sheridan Avenue. As Councilman Greenwell pointed out, we were set to be heard on this back in April. The Friday before the first City Council hearing, we started to receive some protest letters. We worked to have a neighborhood meeting. It became clear that there were some concerns around the multifamily portion of this project. And so over the last 6 months, we've met with Mr. Work, who's the neighborhood's representative, and multiple neighbors. I think one of the key things that led to an amicable decision here that got everyone comfortable was that we've put a density cap. We've restricted the multifamily to senior living. We actually defined what senior living is, and then we worked out some access and some architectural regulations that got everyone comfortable. And so I believe there are some neighbors here today that are in support of us moving forward at this point. So we would ask for your approval. I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Mark. Kelly, did you have anything to say? Okay. Well, you're welcome to come up. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilman Greenwell. My name is Kelly Work, and my address is 105 North Hudson. And as Mr. Zitzau said, I am representing the Santa Fe Sunset neighborhood, which is located to the south and east of the subject property. And I can confirm what Mr. Zitzau has advised, that we were able, after some meetings and negotiation and compromise, to reach an agreement on the terms of this SPUD, and we're not aware of any remaining opposition to it. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Kelly. And Kelly, again, extend my appreciation to the residents and everyone involved with this process. And with that, I'd like to move for approval.
All right. I'll take that as a motion for the amending the master design statement.
Okay, yes.
11C1. A motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. And then we have the ordinance itself at 11C2.
Okay, I'd like to move for approval, please.
Motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. And Joy Reardon, you wish to make a general statement regarding the zoning cases?
Same thing.
Okay, all right.
It's putting overabundance stress on both the police department, fire department, and the water system and all that. And it goes back to the fact that if we want to keep doing all these housing developments and stuff, I think that they should take on some of the responsibility of the streets and stuff, to improve the streets, sidewalks and stuff, because of the heavy truck traffic. I drove a truck for 30 years, and I know what trucks do to the streets and stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, 11D1, amending the master design statement, and 11D2 is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 300 Northwest 62nd Street, going from SPUD 657 to SPUD 1424. This is in Ward 2, and this was deferred a couple times. Councilwoman Nice?
Yes, I want to move forward as I was asked to do, first with the amending the master statement.
Okay. Got a motion and a second for item 11D1, amending the master design statement. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
And now with the ordinance, I would like to move that forward, please.
All right, that's a motion for 11D2. A motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11E1 is amending a master design statement, and 11E2 is the ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 928 Northwest 107th, going from R1, R4, and C3 to SPUD 1425. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, please get your fingers ready because we're going to be voting quite a few times. But I do want to say thank you to Mr. Box and to Mr. Garrett for meeting and us being able to discuss thoroughly through this process of what we are seeing today. So I will ask that we amend the master design statement first.
All right, got a motion for 11E1. Motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
And pass the ordinance. I move for that, please.
Okay, it's for 11E2. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Now we're at 11F1 is amending the master design statement. 11F2 is the ordinance on final hearing at 325 Northwest 96th Street, going from R1 and SPUD 1080 to SPUD 1429. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, I will move that we amend the master design statement.
Got a motion and a second for 11F1. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
And now I will ask that we move the ordinance.
We have a motion then for 11F2, the ordinance on final hearing. Motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, 11G is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 3528 Northwest 26th, going from R1 to SPUD 1436. This is in Ward 2. Councilwoman Nice.
Thank you again. I was asked to move these forward, so I will ask that we move for approval.
A motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11H is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 181001 North May, going from PUD 1111 to SPUD 1437. Councilman Stonecipher.
Thank you, Mayor. On August 11th, 2022, the Planning Commission recommended approval. There are no protests, so at this time, I will move for approval of item 11H.
I'm not getting anything, but it looks like there's a motion and a second. Here we go. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11I is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 1804 East Madison Street, going from R1 to SPUD 1439. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, I will move for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item J was previously deferred, which brings us to item K. This is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval to close a portion of Northwest 106th between Hudson and Walker. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, I know this is one that's connected to a couple of others we've already voted on, so I will move for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, 11L is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval to close part of the east-west alley in the Chester Hill addition and part of North Harvey between 96th and 97th. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, I will move for approval for this application.
A motion and a second. Maybe. Here it comes. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11M is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval to close Northwest 106th Street between Western and Francis and portions of a nearby alleyway in the Homedale addition. Councilwoman Nice.
Yes, this will complete the Ward 7 show. And I do want to also emphasize that we did have some conversations about, I don't know, oh, it wasn't this area. It was a different area pertaining to earlier as far as some drainage and different things that I wanted to make sure we looked at. So I want to thank our Public Works for giving that information back about how these particular applications and what that relationship will be moving forward. So with this one, I would like to move for approval.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11N is a public hearing regarding the ordinance that was presented at the last meeting, updating municipal codes to align with state law on the issue of tobacco and vape products. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak under this public hearing?
No, they haven't.
All right, then we will close the hearing and move on to 11O, which is a public hearing regarding the ordinance previously discussed at our last meeting relating to personnel and retirement system and creating the Deferred Compensation Board. And I think, Craig, you have something you want to say on this today.
Yes. So we have an amendment we're going to make to this, proposed to this. So it's an amendment of the ordinance. We're going to make an amendment to that. It'll come back on the next agenda. What we're doing is, as it stood already, we had several members that by their position were going to serve on the board. We also had representatives of the 457 program, which would be 2 representatives and 1 from the 401 programs. And this is just really oversight of those programs. We were approached by some of the bargaining units, the presidents of bargaining units, and asked if we could ensure that we had representation on each one of the bargaining units. So what we're doing is with the 457 plan is we're going to expand the board to have 2 additional members. It will now have 4 representatives instead of 2 from the 457. It'll be 1 from the FOP, 1 from the IFF, and 1 from AFSCME, and then 1 from unrepresented employees. And so that'll be a change that we'll make. It doesn't change anything else as far as the function and the role of this board, but we want to accommodate that, and that amendment, that proposed amendment, will be on the next agenda.
Okay. But council members each have a copy
Yes, there are
of
copies in
the
front of
details in front of them.
And we
Do
highlighted.
we need to make a motion on that at this, or
No,
just
you
put it
didn't.
on the next agenda?
Because it's on public hearing that we couldn't do that, and so we'll do it on the next agenda.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
He just wanted to let you know. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak under this public hearing?
No, they haven't.
All right. Well, we will close the public hearing then and move on. Both of those previous 2 items will be held for votes at our next meeting in 2 weeks. 11P is a public hearing regarding an ordinance relating to advertising and signs. This is the updated sign code that was presented at our last meeting. Today's just a public hearing. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, they haven't.
So we will close the public.
I do have a question, though, maybe for staff that I wanted to ask, that I just realized I forgot to ask last time and thought this might be a good opportunity to, because I think, I assume maybe other people have the same question. But you had spoken and presented about okay, let me see if I can do this right, that if this, and correct me if I get any of it wrong. So if a mural that or application is submitted and it has less than 10% of the submission as wording, it wouldn't need any kind of special exception kind of thing. But if it did have more than 10%, there would be another layer of consideration. Can you tell me the background for that, specifically what is informing that, and kind of just the reason for that 10% number and kind of how we got to that?
Sure. Lisa Chronister, Assistant Planning Director. The 10% of text in a mural is part of the existing murals definition and regulations. So that's where that started. And I believe the origination of that, it was mainly to provide for the artist's signature, things like that.
Okay.
And a larger intent was to somehow prevent it from becoming advertising. So that has been the standard for some time. As you've probably seen on some murals around town, artists increasingly desire to use text, words in their design. So we wanted to provide a way for them to do that without having to get a variance, without having to go to Board of Adjustment, pay another fee, have another process.
Gotcha. So this would just be through Arts Commission.
So Arts Commission, and then the ordinance, the new code would authorize the planning director to permit it with the Arts Commission's recommendation that it is an artistic expression.
Okay. Is there language about how the planning director is supposed to be guided?
The planning director is guided from Arts Commission's recommendation.
I guess my query is also just related to what was, and I guess it's sounding like it is trying to guard against it being an advertisement, but I guess I'm just kind of curious if, I don't know, it just seems like you said, so many more artists are using text in murals, and I see it in other cities, and I want to make sure, I guess, that, because we've also received, information from, I believe, the ACLU, that there's been concerns about kind of the First Amendment concerns of when, Yeah, just like when, if we have guidance about like when you can say no to something versus when you don't have any reason to say no to that recommendation on the like, Arts Commission's side.
Yes, I haven't heard that the ACLU has asked about the murals provision specifically, but we are meeting with them on Friday to talk about other concerns.
Okay. So yeah, I guess when it comes to the Art Commission, do they, like, what is their kind of guidance as far as making that recommendation? Is there anything specific, or is it just kind of make sure that it kind of follows the other code more broadly?
Yes, the Arts Commission, we've embedded some murals criteria in the code, but they also maintain a separate murals policy to help guide their decisions. And then we're asking them, once the code is adopted, we're asking them to form a work group to really lay out some criteria. It is going to be tricky.
Right. Okay, so kind of, I know I had asked some questions. There was conversation about their general guidance of recommendations, and so it sounds like they'll also be creating that guidance around the text specific.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. Well, if there's no other comments or questions on the proposed sign code, we can close the public hearing, and that will be heard for a potential final vote in 2 weeks. Item 11Q1 is a public hearing regarding the dilapidated structures here listed. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, they haven't.
So we will close the public hearing and proceed to item 11Q2, the resolution declaring that the structures are dilapidated. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11R1 is a public hearing regarding unsecured structures here listed, except for those that were previously struck. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, they haven't.
Mayor, I
Yes.
would like to defer item K for 2
Okay.
weeks, if you don't mind, please.
Okay. So let's take a motion then to defer item 11R1K. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, we'll close the public hearing and proceed to the resolution found at 11R2, declaring that the structures are unsecured, except for those previously struck or deferred. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, 11S1 is the public hearing regarding the abandoned buildings here listed, except for those previously struck. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, they haven't.
Mayor, item I appears for the previously.
Item I?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
So there's a request to defer item 11S1I. Need to bring up a motion for that. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, we'll close the public hearing and proceed to the item found at S2, the resolution declaring that the buildings are abandoned except for those previously struck or deferred. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, 11T is the public hearing regarding the joint resolution with the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust approving an allocation in a total amount not to exceed $16 million for the Strawberry Fields project. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak under this public hearing?
No, they haven't.
They have not. There is an amendment to this item, which was deferred from our previous meeting, and that is found at item T2, correcting the typographical error and addressing the hotel no subsidy zone issue. Do we want to hear a little bit about
Yes,
this?
Kenny Soodle with the Alliance for Economic Development will give us an update on the amendments that are on the agenda.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Kenton Sudol at the Alliance. Just very quickly, this was the second hearing. It was originally heard and introduced and set for final hearing on September 13th, and then the final hearing was deferred from the last meeting. Really, as the mayor read, we had two things. One, we had a typographical error we needed to change in the name of the developer. But the main reason we wanted to bring this back was adding an amendment to ensure that the any development that happens over there complies with the city's agreement with the Omni Hotel. Just as a reminder, back in 2017, we entered into an agreement with Omni to construct the new Convention Center Hotel, and part of that was it created a no subsidy zone, which essentially goes from Lee to Joe Carter, from the I-40 up to about Dean McGee, roughly. There's a map that's actually drawn in that agreement. What that provided for was for 15 years from the date of the certificate of occupancy of the Omni. The city could not provide any subsidy or assistance to another hotel in that zone. Part of Strawberry Fields development is in that zone, and this is just a clarification. We don't have any, as they presented last time, we don't have any immediate plans on hotels there, but basically this just provides that it could not move forward with any city subsidy within that time frame without coming back and working through whatever the issues are with the city. So really just clarifying that, making sure that we signal to the Omni folks that they've been a great partner and that we're a couple of years in on that deal and want to make sure we're not violating anything there, just making sure we take care of our responsibilities there. So with that, be happy to answer any questions.
I've got a real quick question. I know on the original plans, there were some plans for motels in that area. So the plan going forward, have we changed those to something besides motels? Or are we just going to delay the construction on that?
Well, there in some of their original stuff, there were some conceptual plans for that, and they're here if they need any further clarification, but right now there weren't any immediate plans. They presented 4 projects that they're considering, and none of those are hotels. So right now, there wasn't any specific plan. It was more of a conceptual. So that was just something that wasn't necessarily adopted as part of this allocation, but it was something that was, in part of their planning process. But really what this says is if they're prohibited, but if they do contemplate that, they would have to come back to the city for approval. So it's sort of got protection for our agreement with Omni, but also making sure if they did contemplate something, they'd have to come back specifically for approval from you all on that.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Kenny.
So that explains the amendment. We should take that up first. And so that would be item 11T2. We could do a motion for its adoption. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Now we're on 11T3. This is the joint resolution with the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust approving the allocation to Strawberry Fields as now amended.
I have some just comments I'd like to make before we vote.
Sure.
As I think I made some comments when this was introduced about how I struggle with these types of projects when there's no codified language in them to create a broad amount of community or meet broader community needs and community benefits. I want infill development in the ward. I want mixed use neighborhoods. Like a lot of this project speaks to a lot of the things that I value and on principle think is how we should be developing spaces. But I do struggle that this is an area of the city that has been long, like I don't think I can say long enough times forgotten. And especially, again, as I said previously, sandwiched between a highway and a river, and then the highway moves, and now this is, an attractive place for development. but it kind of, we're not writing into the requirements to utilize public funds for these types of projects, that kind of broad community development mindset, and like I said, codifying it. And I find it interesting that another private entity that using public funds for the development in this area can sort of dictate what another private entity is doing through that kind of agreement, but for some reason we just don't seem to have the will to dictate those sorts of things, again, in a codified way, to tie some, I guess you would call them strings, additional strings to this type of investment from the public side. And, again, not that I don't think that this developer might not have intent to do some of these, workforce affordable or maybe even a more accessibly affordable types of units. But again, when we're not codifying that, which we've clearly seen we could do, because we've done it in other agreements where for other reasons we literally put into writing in the agreement that you can do or cannot do X, Y, Z. It's just something I struggle with when we talk about any of these allocations. I know with a previous project very nearby, I had the same concern. And when I think again about this area of the city that people have been living in for decades, and that has just been left sort of behind, that we need to really make sure that as we go forward with these kinds of investments and developments that we're not leaving those folks behind and not letting their rafts continue to have holes in them. So that I just wanted to express that. It's not anything about this developer or this project, because like I said, I think, I love that they're contemplating the restoration and rehabilitation of buildings instead of just raising everything. And I think there's so much about this that I really value, but I just don't feel like I can support this allocation based on sort of, again, that gap that I continually see, not just with this project, but with many of our projects, where we're incentivizing development, and I think in many ways that is a necessary thing for the public sector to do. But when we do that from the public sector, I feel like there needs to be, again, more codified information in the agreement to really make sure that we're not leaving folks behind and not displacing people based on the unintended consequences of developments. So I just needed to make those statements, and I guess that's all I really have to say. So thanks.
Okay. If there are no other comments or questions, we could proceed with consideration of the joint resolution. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes 7-1. All right, now we advance to 11U. This is a resolution authorizing commissioned police officers of the Oklahoma City Police Department to serve and provide law enforcement assistance in other jurisdictions when properly requested and approved. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, so this item, legal had looked at this, and we've already got authorization in emergency situations to do this, but at times we are called in to assist with investigations or provide other types of support that don't necessarily qualify specifically as an emergency. This would authorize us to do that. So it's really authorizing a practice that we've already been conducting, but just ensuring that we're clarifying that both in emergency and in sometimes in non-emergency cases that we can do this. It is always going to be dependent upon the availability of resources that we have, and so we will limit that and manage that based on the resources we have. But where other jurisdictions need assistance, that we can provide that assistance.
Can you provide some examples when this might be approved, this kind of request?
I'll let Chief Gorley provide that. I know we've had some situations with investigations, but I'll let him give us some examples.
Sure, Wade Gorley, Chief of Police. One of probably the easiest examples that I can provide is on game days at the University of Oklahoma and Oklahoma State University. We provide assets for bomb sweeps that they don't currently have in those regions, and those are requirements that are usually put on very similar like the NBA has requirements for their events. These colleges at the different levels have those requirements as well. And for example, when OU moves to the SEC, there'll be higher requirements on that, and there'll be a requirement that we provide those assets down there to assist those smaller agencies.
And in those two examples, we actually get reimbursed for our costs.
We do.
There are
That is
some
correct.
situations where we may assist an agency, like with an investigation or something like that, where we don't get reimbursed, but in these cases, we do.
Yes, and absolutely. We have a lot of resources available to us, being the largest agency in the state, that some of the smaller agencies in the metro area do not have. So we've often assisted in investigations, maybe with our CSI or some of our detectives, just depending on what those agencies need as help. And I always say, and I tell our people, that being the largest agency in the state isn't a bragging right, it's a responsibility, and we have an obligation to help these other agencies. And we just want to clarify some of that language that will cover our officers, in non-emergency situations as well.
Chief, just this week, an example of this developed in another state where a long unsolved murder had finally been resolved, and one of the family members indicated that the local police department would not accept assistance from a larger metropolitan police department to help with the investigation, and contributed to the delay in finding the suspect. So, as you mentioned, I think the resources we have an obligation to share those when requested. So.
And that's a good example. It brought up another instance where we had a shooting in another city that they didn't have the resources to process the firearm evidence, and we did that and actually tied that firearm to some other shootings in our city too. So it's very helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions? If not, we could consider the resolution. There's a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11V is a resolution authorizing the Oklahoma City Chief of Police, after review by the municipal councilor, to engage in joint task forces with federal, state, local, or county law enforcement agencies and to engage in related activities.
Clea Fisher is here with the Municipal Council's office to explain this resolution.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Essentially, this resolution is being presented to clarify an existing resolution that was adopted in March of 2000. Under the 2000 resolution, the chief is authorized to enter into interagency agreements or interagency task forces, and then to sign the necessary documentation to effectuate those agreements. However, we had a situation arise recently in which a long-standing task force was dissolved or terminated. All of the participating agencies agreed to distribute the assets amongst the participating members, and an agreement was prepared. However, it was determined that the chief did not have the authority under the 2000 resolution to sign that distribution agreement. So this resolution will close that loophole, allow the chief to sign off on agreements both creating and terminating task forces. Of course, with review by the municipal councilor's office first. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, if there's no comments or questions, we could take up the resolution found at 11V. Motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, 11W1 is the collective bargaining agreement with AFSCME, retroactive to July 1st. Executive session is not requested. I don't know, Craig, if you want to make any comments.
Yes, Amy Madera, our Human Resources Director, is going to give us just an overview of the agreement. We've discussed this previously with council and briefings, but wanted to bring this forward. I just want to acknowledge, too, the work of the team, the negotiating team, to get us to a place where we have an agreement, but also with Bruce Davis and his team for working with us. They pushed us and we worked together. We didn't always agree, but we worked through the issues, and I really do appreciate that effort. in representing their members and taking care of our employees. And so, Amy, I'll let you just give the overview here on the agreement.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Council. Thank you, Craig. And again, I echo the sentiment. It was a very strong cross-functional team in partnerships with our ASME president that lends us to the ASME agreement that we have before you today. Just as a reminder, our labor agreements are retroactive to the beginning of the fiscal year, so this will reflect back to July 1, 2022. It'll run through June 30, 2023. Substantive changes that we have that we've agreed upon is a base pay adjustment of 7% across the board. That will be retroactive to July 1, a one-time stipend of $1,470 for our AFSCME members. We also had some adjustments within accrued sick leave hours that they need to be able to have in order to eligible to participate in our sick leave conversion program. We also made a few adjustments operationally to be able to make sure that we're providing coverage for our residents when it comes to a holiday pay for our Memorial Day and Juneteenth, as well as additional limited times when the department would be able to work with the employee to do a day off in lieu of an observed holiday to be able to make that payment so that way we're able to provide services for our Monday through Friday 8 to 5 employees. We had some various other changes. The only other substantive changes is we do have, with a very small group with our fire apparatus team, that we have reduced their on-call comp time from 32 hours to 16. And then the employees moving and being employed after July 1, 22 will be receive overtime and not comp time. So those are the substantive changes within the agreement. Any questions?
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if there are no comments or questions, we can take up the agreement found at 11W1. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Congrats to Amy and the team.
Yep.
Okay, that brings us to 11X. This is a resolution approving the general non-represented pay plan established for full-time regular budgeted employees excluded from coverage by AFSCME. Mr. City Manager.
So X and Y, this provides for, on X, it's general pay plan employees that are not represented as part of AFSCME, and then Y is for the management employees, anyone in that pay plan. And it applies the same pay increase that we've provided for AFSCME, and so it allows for that in both of those cases.
Okay. Well, we can start by taking up the resolution at item X.
Before we do that, I just wanted to say, as I looked at the pay plan, that I would hope, especially for us as a city, as we want to attract folks to come and work for our government, that we look at establishing wages that at least begin at $15 an hour. As I look at item, what am I looking at? Item X, I see the starting hourly wage for us is $11.53. So I know there are many wages that are well under, as you continue to move forward, that are well under $15 an hour. And that's something that I believe as an entity we should look forward as far as how we want to employ people to work for our city entity and how we can bring new and thoughtful minds to the conversation of being employed with our city, especially when we have continuous job fairs and asking for people to come and work for our city. The least we could do is look at how we compensate those said employees by that hourly wage. So that's just my overall suggestion as I read and look, because I know as a city entity we could do a little better than that.
Okay. If there are no other comments, we can take a motion on X. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 11Y is the resolution approving pay plans for management, administrative, and technical support positions, et cetera. And I think the explanation the city manager just provided covered item Y as well. I have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, home stretch. 11Z1 is the resolution authorizing the municipal council to confess judgment without admitting liability in the case of Corella v. City of OKC. Executive session is not requested. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11AA are claims recommended for denial. Executive session is not requested. We have items A through E we could take with one motion.
All right, before we do that, I wanted to make mention, because we did defer item B for 2 meetings, and that was for discussion of what that denial claim was. And I just want to reemphasize, as we look at certain denials, and even the reason this one piqued my interest in particular was because of the way that this was written and received as far as the incident is concerned. So I just want to say, as we have construction services for our public works, there was a pothole in an active work zone, and because this indicated the contractor was responsible for the road, therefore the contractor failed to repair the road, we are not responsible for that, which I would like to say in good faith, for us to be the oversight of these types of projects. It seems as if we would be more willing to work with these folks when it comes to these types of denials. And not to say that we haven't reached out to this young lady about this concern, but it's unfortunate that we have these types of contracts to where, as a city, they are reaching out to us to understand what's happening, and it's harder for us to give them that information because it's someone else. So I just wanted to make mention of that, because I know we're probably going to see more of these types of denials in the way that we've seen this one today.
Okay. We could take a motion on AA1. We've got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. 11AB1 are claims recommended for approval. Executive session is not requested. We have items A and B we can take with one motion. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, that concludes the voting for the morning. We are now at item 12, comments from council. Ward 1. Ward 3.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of comments. First, to our city employees and our police officers and firefighters, just congratulations on the recent resident survey results. We're very proud of you. Keep up the good work. And then West 10 District hosts the Council Grove, Castle Falls historically local tour that includes a history of the many salvaged items from downtown Oklahoma City from the 1900s that are embedded in the castle and the Czechoslovakian family that built the castle, and an overview of Council Grove as a part of the unassigned lands in the 1800s. The tour is the 3rd Saturday of every month, so this coming Saturday from noon to 1. Registration is required online at west10districtokc.com in their events section. I've been a couple of times. I've taken some out-of-town guests. It's a very interesting tour. There's a lot of really cool artifacts from downtown Oklahoma City out there in the castle and on the grounds. And so if you ever have an opportunity to go, I strongly recommend it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ward 4.
Thank you, Mayor. Last Thursday, I was able to attend the funeral for Police Officer Sergeant Megan Burke. And I really just wanted to take the opportunity to offer my condolences to her family, friends, and coworkers. She is a great police officer, worked a lot with our disadvantaged youth. And I'd also like to thank those that got up and spoke at the funeral, sharing their experiences and thoughts with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Ward 6?
Yeah, the only thing I have is I know with as sort of COVID precautions aren't as fore of mind for many people. There is a new booster that is available for pretty much everybody that has been approved for just the general vaccines that we've that have become available since 2021. And I got and I was very confused for a long time about what boosters were available for certain people or not. And so, I just want to put that out there that you can always go to vaxokc.org, the City County Health Department's website, to get information on who's eligible, what boosters are available, as well as scheduling an appointment either with them, or they have portals that lead you to all the various pharmacies in the area. And so I got my bivalent booster and flu shot last Tuesday, and am very happy to report that I really only had arm soreness was my main side effect, because I know a few boosters ago it really put me out of commission for a day or two. So I just want to encourage folks to go keep up with those, because those boosters are the way that, as we have gotten accommodated or kind of to getting a regular flu shot every year, just that maintenance of those COVID precautions and keeping that immunity. I had COVID in June for the first time, and it was not fun. I was fully vaccinated and boosted, and it still was not fun. And I don't want to do that when I don't have that additional, my body doesn't have that additional protection. So really just encourage folks to, reach out to the health department if you have any questions. They've been really great partners in just helping answer questions, getting appointments scheduled for folks who might not have internet access. So just want to put that out there, since I know it's not always on the radar, kind of top level of mind for folks these days.
Thank you. Ward 7?
Yes, I just have a couple things. I also wanted to extend my condolences to the family of Sergeant Burke. I know just getting off work and having those types of just tragic incidents that occur are gut-wrenching to any family, so definitely wanted to do that. And also to the young man that was killed in that drive-by, DeMarcus Fuller Jr., to hear of a 9-year-old being caught in the crossfire definitely resonates with me personally, from a personal experience of my 10-year-old cousin being killed in a very similar way. So my thoughts are definitely with his family as well. I wanted to just mention a couple of things. On Friday, we were able to enjoy the memorial service for the fire department, for our local fire department, that they held at the Central Unit Station, I think it's Station 1? Yeah, Station 1. And to see the new memorial that they have for those officers that have served and that perished while serving. It's some interesting stories to read of some of those firefighters, especially from the early part of them being established and until now, most recently, with our firefighter that we lost late 2020 due to COVID. So being able to just see the names and understand the stories clearly tells the history of the department, and to see the families that are still represented for those particular members. And they also honored and recognized folks who have been on the staff for the fire department that have perished and went on. So that was very nice to see that type of notice as far as being able to recognize them. Indigenous Peoples Day yesterday was wonderfully attended for the time that I saw, and I know last year we had to do it inside, but this year it was outside, and it was most beautiful. And I had some young ladies, they were older than me, but I call them young ladies, from Arizona that said they were here just to see the museum, and they come every year. And one young lady, she was with her mom, and her mom lived in Midwest City. And both of them are about to relocate to the East Coast. So she's taken her mom of 43 years as a resident of Oklahoma County to the East Coast. So I told her, this is still your home. So we hope that you will come back and see us when you can. So again, to those who were in attendance, there was parking all the way down to Crooked Oak. That's where people had to park. So that tells you of the interest of those who have been a part of the land since its inception, and in us coming here, that we know it belongs to them. In Northeast Vikings, they had a class of 70, 71, and 72 had their golden anniversary. And that was pretty cool to see those Vikings from 50 years ago and the mark that they made on our city, marching to the Capitol and then being able to reenact that same process as older folks, but they did say they just walk slowly, but they'll get there, and being able to listen to their stories and understand their advocacy of being students at Northeast and the impact of what Northeast brought to the Oklahoma City public school system, not just that school. And as I was reading in one of those appointments as far as our housing authority member, I just wanted, it says the term ended, but I just want to make mention that that member actually resigned, and I was at that meeting when she did resign, because there were 2 members that resigned on that same day, for us to appoint members now to this Housing Authority Board. So I just wanted to make mention of that, and looking forward to us being able to celebrate the things that are happening as far as those revocable permits in our communities in the future.
Ward 8.
I just wanted to echo on Barbara's comments. I want to thank Chris Tatum and his group, ETC Institute. I really enjoyed the presentation on our residential survey. And the 2022 survey, I think the results are great. I think when you have 85% of the people saying this is a great place to live and 82% saying it's a great place to work, and we're in the 70s for it's a great place to raise your children, I think that validates, I think that proves, I think that shows that what we're trying to accomplish as a city is working. And I hope we, and I know Christy will because she does a great job with public relations, I hope we get this message out. The one thing I did learn today, Craig, was that most people read their water bill, and that's the way they get their news about Oklahoma City. I did not know that, so I hope that this information will be put in our water bill. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to citizens to be heard, item 13. We have 2 who have signed up to speak. Joy Reardon, be followed by Randall Ward.
Joy Reardon, 125 Northwest 9th. Councilman Nice, what is the status of the investigation into housing? You called for an investigation when they came and begged for $1.25 million.
Still waiting for some things, and having conversations with other community residents or people that have worked with or for formerly the Housing Authority, as far as employment practices and how they have housed and warehoused residents and tenants in their properties. So still waiting for some other pieces of what I've asked for.
Okay. Have you got anything on the project with the duplexes?
I have not. Not to the extent that I've asked. I know I do have some community members who attended their last meeting, their last board meeting, and asked for some answers. I think we're all still just kind of waiting to hear what they are doing, and how, when we look at the conversations, even with the presentation about homelessness and housing, that we have empty duplexes that could house people until we work towards a way to move into their plan that they have proposed.
One other thing, and this is for the whole horseshoe. You may want to start looking into Mr. Mark Gillett. My understanding, and it is public knowledge, that he is the CEO of housing, and he's also the head of the board for the CEC. And something that y'all may not know is the dispensaries are paying better wages than what housing is paying their security. And some nights they don't have anybody. Most 11 to 7 shift or first and second shift. First shift during the day they may have 4 officers. That second shift from 3 to 11, they may only have 2 to cover the whole city. That's something that y'all probably didn't even know. Something needs to be done, please. And that's not coming from me, that's coming from our residents and stuff like that. We've got people that's been banned from our building that keep coming in, and OCPD is getting tired of responding when security can't or won't.
Okay, time's expired. Thank you,
Oh,
Joy.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
No worries.
I have a couple other things, but that's
Ra-
one of the biggest ones right there.
Okay, Randall Ward.
Feel kind of guilty now. Usually your meetings run a little longer. So, Randall Ward, 12624 Steve Drive. That's in Ward 4. And I was in another meeting. Watch this on YouTube, and it tells you how boring that meeting was. But so I decided to come over here and just catch up on a couple of little things. The survey, which I participated in, I didn't expect that I'd get a little red dot, so now all my neighbors know I participated, or at least someone on our street did. And Councilperson Hammond, the safety thing you were talking about earlier, the people's perception that some areas are dangerous, I've been hearing that since the 60s. In Edmond, would come down and do driver's ed at night so we could learn how to drive in a city. And people are like, oh, that's too dangerous. I don't want my kids going down there. And I heard it at a half marathon on the river trails. You know, where's the safest place to park? And everyone had a different opinion. So I don't know. It's just a perception. And also, flu shots, COVID boosters, please. But real quick, I want to talk a little bit about responsible development. And I'd mentioned this to Councilperson Stone in an email. I have benefited from development. I mean, there's a sit-down restaurant 5 miles from my house now. Wendy's, but still, I can go in and order. And dollar stores, I can buy milk without driving into town. And just all sorts of things. The streets are fine. I have no complaints about the streets. We have the Draper Trails, which many people think aren't safe, but those of us who use them like them. But real quickly, just in my neighborhood, there's the trend to building the houses on pedestals. There's a house behind me, which about 15 years ago, that land was underwater. But if you if you're not in a floodplain and you pile up dirt, you can build a house there. I think it's a dangerous trend, and there's a bunch of them going in. Bulldozing up to, I wrote down bulldozing up to trees. There's a development over at 74th and Anderson. It's going in, mixed use, I think a little bit of commercial. Yeah, they're trying to save the trees, but they're bulldozing right up to them.
30
The
seconds,
chance of
please.
a tree surviving that's had its roots disturbed like that, or it's nil. And dead trees everywhere, just because of that kind of development. They're even on the trails, and it's been, 3 or 4 years since they were finished, so. And also, real quickly, I know I'm running out of time, but in a couple of weeks, y'all are going to hear the big development over by the gun range on Air Depot. And I'm concerned about that, but also this would be an opportunity for y'all to come in and do some responsible, good development, to come in and say, you know, don't just pick out a tree and say we won't bulldoze it. Put some tape around it. Try to minimize the space that that thing is going to occupy. And frankly, I am opposed to it. I won't say I'm opposed to it. I don't think a warehouse on such a unique piece of property is really appropriate. But y'all will, I know you will approve it. I mean, if there's a no vote, I'd be shocked. And it went through the Planning Commission in under 2 minutes. But anyway, real quickly, I think it's an opportunity for y'all to say, you know what, we're going to do things right. We're going to minimize. We're going to make these people justify why they need a 400-space parking lot out there. And there was something else, but I'll try to come back then and talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes citizens to be heard, and we have nothing else on the agenda, so we are adjourned.